Chapter 5275. Sunflower Bible? What does that mean? Shui Jianfeng was startled. He obviously didn't know about this common world joke. To practice this art, you must first castrate yourself. Don't you have these words on the first page of your art? Chen Tian chuckled. The others burst out in laughter. Even Lung Lung couldn't help but smile. She was initially on high alert, but now she wasn't so nervous anymore. Die, you bastard! Shui Jianfeng snapped back to reality and became furious. A mere Foundation Establishment Realm Peak dared to make fun of him, a Golden Core full cycle master. How reckless! With his current strength, it would be useless no matter how Lung Lung and the others worked together. Whoever he wanted to die would die. No one would be able to stop him. Shui Jianfeng made his move immediately, his entire body flying above everyone's heads, reaching out to grab Yu Bing and Wu Qintian's heads. He was planning to leave Lung Lung and Lingshan alive and enjoy them later, but Yu Bing and Wu Qintian, these guys who didn't know what was good for them, shouldn't even think about living. You guys go first. With a loud shout, Lung Lung took the initiative to meet him. Although she almost succeeded in challenging someone of a higher level previously, facing the current Shui Jianfeng with her mere foundation building great circle was no different from an ant trying to shake a tree. However, she had no other choice. Lingshan and the others didn't waste any time. They ran away without hesitation, saying that they would live and die together would only be a joke. All they could do was to escape as soon as possible and not be a burden to Lung Lung. You think you can stop me? When Shui Jianfeng saw this, he couldn't help but reveal a mocking smile. Last time, he had been humiliated by Lung Lung. This time, it was a good opportunity for him to get back at her. He wanted to let her experience the difference between them and the taste of despair. Golden Core, full cycle against Foundation Establishment, full cycle. It was an undeniable battle. Shui Jianfeng didn't even need to use his sword. It would be an insult to himself. Moreover, he only wanted to toy with Lung Lung. He didn't plan to take her life yet. Seeing Lung Lung's whip kicks sweeping over, Shui Jianfeng smiled coldly as he raised his hand to block. He knew that he didn't even need to use his full strength. Lung Lung would fall on her own. Pung! Accompanied by the dull sound of a fist and a leg colliding, Shui Jianfeng's body suddenly paused. Following that, a strange expression appeared on his face. Cold was actually not repelled by him. He could not help but be stunned for a moment. How is this possible? With such a huge difference in strength, even if she didn't use her full strength, she should be heavily injured. She couldn't just not take a step back, right? This is... Shui Jianfeng hastily accepted the challenge, but the situation was far beyond his expectations. He, who had the advantage of an entire realm, was actually suppressed by cold. Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but recall the situation in the primordial trials last time. It was the same at that time. As an early-stage Gold Core expert, he almost failed miserably at Lung Lung's hands. Now that he had become an expert in the Golden Core Perfection realm, he thought that he could easily wipe away his previous humiliation. He didn't expect that he would fall into such a strange situation again. It was already a rare thing to fight an enemy of a higher realm. It was even more difficult to fight an enemy of a higher realm. As for someone like Cold who wanted to fight an enemy of a higher realm, it was something that had never happened before. It was simply a fantasy. What was even more ridiculous was that Shui Jianfeng was actually suppressed and couldn't break free for a while. Instant close-range combat was an extremely troublesome battle tactic, especially when it was coupled with the deceleration effect of Cold's ice prison mirror. Even Shui Jianfeng couldn't easily shake it off. It would be fine if that was all, but the strange state that Cold Lung was displaying right now was truly frightening. Not only was the cold air surrounding her body, even the exposed skin such as her palms and neck had turned into a cold gleam, as if they were formed into ice crystals. Shui Jianfeng couldn't figure out what was going on, but his pride would never allow him to be suppressed by a Foundation building perfection realm expert like Cold. After being forced to take 5 steps back, he suddenly gritted his teeth and stopped his body. He couldn't be bothered to catch his breath and forcefully counterattacked with his palms. Doing so would easily cause him to suffer a backlash, but he couldn't care less as he was enraged. Bang! The two palms collided. This time, Shui Jianfeng had exerted his full strength. However, unexpectedly, Cold Lung didn't retreat. Not only did she not retreat, but her attacks became even fiercer. What the hell? Shui Jianfeng's eyes widened in an instant. He couldn't understand what was going on at all. There was only one thought in his mind: this world was too crazy. However, he was the leader of the younger generation in the ancient martial world after all. Although Cold Lung could barely suppress him, it was mainly because of the element of surprise. At most, she could only take the initiative in the battle. It was almost impossible for her to seriously injure him. After all, there was a gap of a whole realm between them. How could it be so easy to level the gap? After exchanging a few more blows, Shui Jianfeng finally figured out something. He realized that although he had been fighting with Cold Lung head-on every time, the moment when the blows were really exchanged, the force and vital energy that were transmitted to the opponent would always go astray inexplicably. Most of the force would be diverted to the side. In the end, it was estimated that not even 1/10 of the force would be effective on Cold Lung. Shui Jianfeng didn't believe it and tried a few more times. The result was the same every time. Amidst the shock, a thought suddenly flashed in his mind. He blurted out, "Could it be the legendary Ice Skin Jade Skin?" Ice Skin Jade Skin was not a mere description in the Ancient Alliance, especially in the Snow Sword faction. It was a real defensive martial art. It was said that only a few people with extremely special physiques had the opportunity to cultivate it. Once it was cultivated, it could easily disperse most of the attacks. Moreover, it was extremely durable. Even when fighting against an opponent of a higher realm, it would rarely be at a disadvantage. Chapter 5276. You just realized it? A hint of mockery flashed in Lung Lung's eyes. It was normal for others not to realize it. After all, Jade Skin had only appeared a few times in the archaic Jianghu. However, Shui Jianfeng was a real disciple of the Snow Sword School. He was really slow to recognize the martial arts of his school after such a long time. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The martial arts manual of Jade Skin was destroyed a long time ago. Where did you get the martial arts manual? Shui Jianfeng still found it hard to believe. It was not unreasonable for him to be so sure. He had tried to practice Jade Skin in the beginning, and he even spent a lot of money for it. Unfortunately, he found out later that he had no talent in this aspect, so he destroyed half of the martial arts manual in a rage. Thanks to his father, who was the vice leader of the school, he could cover it up without anyone knowing. Otherwise, he would have been severely punished by the school. How could he succeed in practicing without even a martial arts manual? It's none of your business. Lung Lung snorted. Her martial arts manual did not come from the school, but from Lin Yi. In the collection of martial arts manuals sent by Wang Xinyan and others, most of them only had entry-level martial arts manuals and basic martial arts manuals purchased from the black market. However, there were a few martial arts manuals and martial arts manuals that covered almost all the manuals and martial arts manuals, such as the Snow Sword School, where Wei Shinjin was from. Since Lung Lung had already mastered the Drawing Ground Prison and the Ice Prison Mirror, which were extremely threatening skills, she would not consider forcefully breaking through to the Golden Core stage in the short term. Therefore, in the last month before the start of the Archaic Trials, other than consolidating her level, she spent most of her remaining energy on practicing a new skill, which was the Jade Skin that Lin Yi had chosen for her. Strictly speaking, her shattered ice physique did not completely meet the requirements of Jade Skin. She could not learn Jade Skin in such a short time like Painted Ground and Broken Ice Mirror. But her compatibility with Jade Skin was still above 80%. So, she had made some progress over the past month, and now it was coming in handy. Good. So what if you have Jade Skin? It's nothing more than a little endurance. Apart from speeding up the depletion of your dwindling physical strength and true chi, it simply can't harm a single hair of mine. What's the fart use? Shui Jianfeng said with a cold smile. Although he was trying to comfort himself, what he said was indeed true. Jade Skin was just a defensive martial arts skill without any offensive ability. At most, It could only make Cold more resistant to attacks, but it could not fundamentally change the status of the two of them. However, Lung Lung never expected to defeat Xue Jianfei. That wasn't realistic. She only wanted to stall him and buy more time for Ling Shan and the others to escape. And so far, her strategy had succeeded. Almost there. At this moment, Cold's breathing became rather heavy. If she really wanted to hold Xue Jianfei back, it was not enough to rely on Jade Skin alone. She also had to engage in close combat. No matter which one it would consume a lot of her Jin Qi. In addition, she had already consumed a lot of her Jin Qi before. Holding on for half an hour was the limit of her endurance. Any longer, and she would be exhausted. Lung Lung took a deep breath and forced Xue Jianfei to retreat once again. She then turned around and fled without hesitation. Hee, you still want to escape at this time? Aren't you too naive? Xue Jianfei immediately chased after her with a cold smile. Although Lung Lung's speed was not considered slow, the gap between their strengths was there. Unless she had a skill like Lin Yi's, it was almost impossible to get rid of her opponent. In the blink of an eye, Lung Lung's back was hit by a palm. Although she relied on Jade Skin to absorb most of the force, she still spat out a mouthful of blood. However, her feet did not stop at all. Instead, she used the force of the palm to escape even faster. Let's see how long you can last. At this moment, Xue Jianfei had completely thrown Ling Shan and the others to the back of his mind. To be precise, he did not care about these people at all. Only Lung Lung in front of him. He had to get rid of her. In less than a year's time, Lung Lung had rushed from the early phase of foundation building to the full circle of foundation building. She even mastered powerful skills like Painted Prison and Ice Prison Mirror. Now that she had mastered Jade Skin, she could actually cross a whole level to fight with him for so long. The potential that Lung Lung displayed was too terrifying. Even Xue Jianfei, who was proud and arrogant, had to admit that if he continued to let her be, he might be stepped on by Lung Lung one day. He might as well kill her while she was still in the cradle. A cold light flashed, and Xue Jianfei immediately unsheathed his sword. Lung Lung only felt a chill on her back. Her back was immediately hit by the sword, and a glaring flower of blood spurted out. She's actually not dead. Xue Jianfei looked at Lung Lung, who was still running away, and was stunned. He was not pretending to use his sword. He had used his full strength, but he did not expect that it would only leave a small wound on her back. Jade Skin's defense was indeed amazing. Again, I'd like to see how many times you can take my sword, Xue Jianfei said ferociously. At this point, Xue Jianfei did not hide his intention to kill anymore. It was a pity to kill such a beautiful woman like Lung Lung, but he could always find another one. However, if Lung Lung was allowed to grow, it would be his turn to worry about his life. The two of them ran and chased. In less than a moment, they had passed through dozens of miles of dense forest. At this time, Lung Lung's back was already dripping with blood. There were more than a dozen wounds of different sizes. She was only able to hold on with Jade Skin. Otherwise, she would have died a long time ago. Even so, Lung Lung was on the verge of collapsing. Not only was she bleeding from more than a dozen wounds, but most importantly, her physical strength and true qi were almost at their limits. Soon, it should be not far ahead. Lung Lung kept brainwashing herself along the way. Only in this way could she barely hold on and not collapse. They had just passed by this place yesterday, but at that time, they sensed that there was an unusually strong aura of a spirit beast, so they did not dare to approach it rashly. In the end, they took a detour carefully. But now, this unknown powerful spirit beast had become her only chance of survival. She had to find a way to alarm this unknown spirit beast and make it target Xue Jianfei. Only in this way could Lung Lung escape this disaster. There was no other way. Xue Jianfei soon noticed something strange. As an expert in Gold Core Paragon, his perception range was naturally much wider than Lung Lung's. He immediately understood Lung Lung's intention with a thought. Without caring about anything else, he leaped up high and a huge white sword light fell from the sky silently. This was the strongest move he had mastered at the moment, Nine Heavens Sword Fall. Chapter 52-77. Lung Lung stopped abruptly and sighed softly. Farewell, Lin. Lin, he had entrusted Ling Shan and the others to her, and now she had done the best she could. Even if she could not completely ensure everyone's safety, she had a clear conscience and could die in peace. At the last moment, when Lung Lung closed her eyes and waited for her death, a silhouette suddenly appeared beside her. Then, a familiar ice-cold aura materialized and soared into the sky, blocking Xue Jianfeng's Nine Heavens sword. Although it was less than half a second, this half a second was enough for him to save Lung Lung from danger. Merciless ice force. Xue Jianfeng's eyelids twitched. This familiar ice-cold aura was actually merciless ice force. The identity of this person was obvious. It was Bing Wuqing. It's you. At this moment, Xue Jianfeng was not the only one who was shocked. Even Lung Lung, who had just been saved, was so shocked that she could not speak after seeing the appearance of the person who had come. Why would Bing Wuqing save her for no reason at all? Lin, he had never told anyone about the fact that Bing Wuqing and the others had been secretly subdued by him. Only two people knew about this. One was himself, and the other was Lin Dongfang. Lung Lung did not know the inside story, and was of course as shocked as Xue Jianfeng. Let's go. Bing Wuqing had no intention of explaining the whole story at all, and immediately gestured for Lung Lung to escape first. Although Lung Lung was extremely weak at the moment, with the large amount of elixirs that Lin Yi had given her to heal her injuries, it wouldn't take long for her to recover. As long as she was careful, self-preservation shouldn't be a problem. Thank you. Lung Lung knew that this was not the time to be long-winded. She thanked her and immediately turned to leave. Not only did she have to heal her injuries, but she also had to meet up with Ling Shan and the others before they went far. As for why Bing Wuqing saved her, this question could only be explored later. Seeing Lung Lung escape, Xue Jianfeng panicked and wanted to attack again. However, merciless ice force had already enveloped him. His heart skipped a beat, and he did not dare to act rashly. He turned to look at Bing Wuqing with fear. What? You help them? Xue Jianfeng sized Bing Wuqing up again with an unfriendly expression. Logically speaking, Bing Wuqing should be Lin Yi's enemy, and she had even joined the center together with him. What was the meaning of this fellow saving cold? I'm happy, Bing Wuqing said indifferently, her face expressionless. This is a mission given to me by my superiors. How dare you obstruct me? Where did you get the guts to do so? Xue Jianfeng snorted coldly. In the past, due to the difference in their abilities, he had to be somewhat respectful when facing Bing Wuqing. However, there was no need for that now. Is that so? That's your mission, and it has nothing to do with me. The order I received was just not to provoke Lin Yi, Bing Wuqing said nonchalantly. You, Xue Jianfeng could not help but choke. He was a little lacking in confidence, because it was a strict order passed down from the center's headquarters not to provoke Lin Yi. He had urged the bespectacled professor to deal with the people around Lin Yi, but he had acted on his own accord. It was fine to play tricks in the dark, but he could not bring it up in the open. Otherwise, he would be disobeying orders. Even the bespectacled professor might not have the guts to do so, let alone him. Then let me ask you, you were clearly only at the later stage of the Golden Elixir Realm. How did your abilities suddenly become Golden Elixir Realm perfected? You were actually hiding your abilities? Xue Jianfeng said with a frown. Bing Wuqing had blocked his sword fall from the ninth heaven with only the materialized merciless ice force. Even if it was only for half an instant, it was enough to prove that this fellow's abilities were at least at the same level as his. She was already a Golden Elixir Realm perfected expert. One had to know that merciless ice force was merely an aura and was not strictly an offensive or defensive move. Just the thought of Bing Wuqing being able to achieve such a feat with merciless ice force alone was shocking. Even Xue Jianfeng had to admit that although they were at the same realm, if they were to really fight, the other party's chances of winning were obviously higher than his. Same here. Aren't you the same? Bing Wuqing glanced at him, and the corners of her mouth curled into a mocking arc. She said, Do you think that you can surpass me just because you ditched me and secretly followed Foam to court my favor? You actually know about it? Shui Jianfeng was even more shocked. Previously, the bespectacled doctor had clearly told him that the Central Headquarters Focus Training Program was strictly confidential and that it would definitely not be revealed to anyone. How did this fellow know about it? Could you really do something like this without anyone knowing? Bing Wuqing glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Could it be that you've also joined the Focus Training Program? Shui Jianfeng became more and more surprised. After thinking about it carefully, before he took the initiative to court Bing Wuqing, the bespectacled doctor had obviously valued Bing Wuqing more, so it was not impossible for him to join the Focus Training Program. Bing Wuqing smiled faintly. She neither admitted nor denied it, and in Shui Jianfeng's eyes, she became more and more unfathomable. Of course, there was no need for him to reveal his relationship with Lin Yi. He could let this fellow be suspicious on his own. As expected, the more Shui Jianfeng thought about it, the more he realized that Bing Wuqing's leap from the Gold Core later stage to the Gold Core consummation was also the last month before he joined the Center's Focus Training Program. Although it was not as exaggerated as his, to his knowledge, advancing 2 levels in a short month was something that only the Center could do. As for why Bing Wuqing did not advance 6 levels in a row like him, but stopped at the Gold Core consummation, the reason was not difficult to find. Because when he first joined the Focus Training Program, he had been told that the current technology of the Center in the secular world could at most quickly elevate them to the Gold Core consummation, and that was already the limit. As for the nascent soul stage, that technology was still in the experimental stage, and it was far from being mature enough to be officially implemented. With Bing Wuqing's interference, it was no longer realistic for Shui Jianfeng to chase after Cold and the others. Putting aside the question of whether he could find these people again in a short period of time, even if he did find them, it would be useless. Although Bing Wuqing did not speak much, her actions just now had made her attitude clear. If Shui Jianfeng dared to touch Cold and the others, she would attack him. Facing Bing Wuqing, with the power she had accumulated over the years, and the unfathomable skill she had displayed just now, Shui Jianfeng really did not have much confidence to fight her head-on. There would be no benefits if he won, and if he lost, he would be snubbed. Wouldn't that be a waste of effort? Why are you protecting Cold like this? Shui Jianfeng asked in a low voice. I told you just now I'm happy. Bing Wuqing was still expressionless, and no one could tell what she was thinking. Chapter 5278. Bing Wuqing stopped talking and just stared at him. To ensure that Cold and the others could escape safely, she had to keep an eye on Shui Jianfeng for at least an hour. Otherwise, with their meager strength, Shui Jianfeng would catch up to them in the blink of an eye. While the two of them were confronting each other, their eyelids suddenly twitched. A powerful and ferocious aura of a spirit beast was rapidly approaching them from afar. And in the blink of an eye, it was right in front of them. It was a lizard, but not an ordinary one. It was more than 10 meters long from head to tail, and its entire body was covered in silver-gray scales. Its huge mouth was filled with ferocious, sharp teeth, and from time to time, a lump of saliva would flow out of it. A pungent stench assailed their nostrils, and the saliva actually corroded a deep pit into the ground when it fell. It was truly frightening, and their scalps tingled. The primordial giant lizard. Shui Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing blurted out almost at the same time. This image was undoubtedly one of the 10 most ferocious and terrifying spirit beasts in the primordial underworld. They didn't expect it to exist in this place. The primordial giant lizard didn't stop, nor did it have the slightest intention to talk nonsense with the two of them. It roared and charged straight at Bing Wuqing, who was the closest to it. However, this was not strange. The primordial monitor lizards were famous for being powerful, and they were also famous for being brainless. Other than having an extremely strong sense of territory, this fellow's mind was basically a mass of chaos. It did not have any clear consciousness, and only had the most basic beastly instincts left. At its level, other spirit beasts would have developed spiritual intelligence long ago, and their intelligence wouldn't be much lower than that of humans. Unfortunately, the primordial giant lizard was recognized as one of the most retarded spirit beasts. No matter how powerful it was still a wild beast that only knew how to kill. Bing Wuching frowned slightly at the sight and quickly retreated. Unexpectedly, although this primordial giant lizard looked very cumbersome, its movements weren't clumsy at all. Instead, it was extremely agile, and its speed was far above that of ordinary human experts. Even Bing Wuching was caught up in the blink of an eye. Bing Wuching was startled by the other party's foul-smelling saliva as it bit at her. She immediately unleashed her ruthless ice force, which she was best at. The speed of the primordial giant lizard instantly decreased. Just like the black praying mantis that Lung Lung and the others had encountered earlier, it was the most irresistible type of ice attack, which was extremely effective. Bing Wuching seized the opportunity to escape. This primordial giant iguana was obviously a being comparable to a golden core perfected expert. If she was bitten by it, she would either die or be severely injured. That mouthful of saliva was especially horrifying, and if she came into contact with even the slightest bit of it, she would immediately be corroded into a large hole. Even if her vitality was strong enough to survive, she would still be plagued with illnesses in the future, and she would never be able to recover in this lifetime. However, before she could widen the distance between them to more than 30 feet, the primordial giant lizard's scarlet tongue suddenly shot out like a sharp arrow, targeting Bing Wuching. Its speed was more than 10 times faster than her body movement technique, and Bing Wuching couldn't escape at all. Just as she was about to suffer, she quickly formed a seal with her hands, and a thick ice wall suddenly appeared behind her. Although the primordial giant lizard's scarlet tongue came at her fiercely and broke through the ice wall almost instantly, the ice wall kept getting thicker as it was broken. Eventually, she managed to block the attack by a hair's breadth. Phew, this lizard. Bing Wuching heaved a sigh of relief with lingering fear. On the other side, Xue Jianfeng couldn't hide the regret on his face. How good would it have been if Bing Wuching had been killed by the primordial giant lizard just now? Not only would they have one less troublemaker, they would also have one less competitor. It was killing two birds with one stone. What a pity. Bing Wuching could guess his intentions even with her toes. Therefore, after she withstood the primordial giant lizard's first wave of attack, she didn't plan to fight it head-on. After all, even if she could win that way, Xue Jianfeng would only benefit from it. Therefore, she chose to retreat. Under such circumstances, it was best to preserve her strength. What the fuck? You're too cunning. Xue Jianfeng was just about to gloat when he saw Bing Wuching fleeing in his direction, with the primordial giant lizard chasing after her relentlessly. In the blink of an eye, the girl and the lizard were right in front of him. Xue Jianfeng's reaction was a beat too slow, and he was left behind by Bing Wuching in an instant. The primordial giant lizard, which was right in front of him, bit at him again. Xue Jianfeng hurriedly used his sword to block it, only to find that the lizard didn't just have thick skin and thick flesh, but more importantly, its silver-gray scales were too hard. Not only did his full-force strike fail to break through the scales, but it also caused his right hand to go numb from the impact, and he almost dropped his sword. At the same time, the primordial monitor lizard that had missed its bite used the same trick again, and its scarlet tongue lashed out once more. Even though it was extremely soft and didn't possess any offensive power, it was covered in the most terrifying saliva, and as long as it came into contact with even a little bit of it, one would immediately be done for. At this moment, Xue Jianfeng's body was a little stiff from the recoil. If he hadn't seen this move just now, he would definitely be at a great disadvantage if he was caught off guard. Fortunately, he was prepared. The moment the primordial giant lizard's scarlet tongue lashed out, he immediately descended from the sky and used the 9 heaven sword fall, cutting off the tongue with his sword. A several-foot-long, severed tongue bounced around on the ground. The primordial giant lizard, which had suffered a great loss, immediately let out an ear-piercing roar. The veins all over its body twitched violently, and its already ferocious eyes turned bloodshot. It was clearly going berserk. Feeling the violent aura emanating from the primordial giant lizard, Xue Jianfeng's heart skipped a beat. He had poked a hornet's nest. It clearly only had the spiritual intelligence of a wild beast, but could be ranked as one of the 10 most terrifying spiritual beasts in the ancient martial world. There was no doubt about the primordial giant lizard's strength. It was almost invincible among those of the same level. If its original battle power was 1, then after going berserk, its battle power was at least 5, or even more. Facing such an existence, with Xue Jianfeng's current strength, even if he could win, he would definitely lose his life. Moreover, Bing Wuqing was watching him covetously from the side. Xue Jianfeng had already planned to attack Bing Wuqing earlier, so it was hard to say if Bing Wuqing wasn't planning to do the same now. Once the primordial giant lizard went berserk, Xue Jianfeng turned and ran without hesitation. This time, he no longer cared about hiding. It was clearly a hot day, but with every step he took, he would leave a clear snow print on the ground, which then quickly melted. Every time a snow print melted, the speed of his movement technique would increase by a notch. By the time he crossed 10 snow prints, his movement technique speed had increased by at least 2 times. Chapter 52-79. Although Xue Jianfeng was also the leader of the younger generation in the small Jianghu of the immemorial era, a lot of points came from his father, the deputy head of the Snow Sword School. If it was just based on Xue Jianfeng's talent alone, he was at most more outstanding. He couldn't be compared to a true genius like Ling Tianyu. Even Lung Lung could leave him far behind. As the leader of the younger generation, Bing Wuqing was an absolute genius. Naturally, she would look down on a weak leader like Xue Jianfeng. However, she did not expect this guy to have some skills. Traceless snow steps was one of the top movement techniques of the Snow Sword faction. The number of people in the entire Snow Sword faction who could master this movement technique could be counted on one hand. It was not easy. Xue Jianfeng was running towards Bing Wuqing. Now that the primordial giant lizard had gone berserk, its speed could not be measured with common sense. Even if he had traceless snow steps, he might not be able to get rid of it. He might as well do what Bing Wuqing did just now and put the blame on his opponent. When 2 people were being chased by a tiger, they did not necessarily have to outrun the tiger in order to escape. They just had to outrun the other person. This was common sense that everyone knew. Both of them were Golden Core Paragon experts, and they both came from the Snow Sword faction. In this aspect, it was obvious that Xue Jianfeng, who had the traceless snow steps as a base, was at an advantage. Unless Bing Wuqing also knew traceless snow steps. Unfortunately, Bing Wuqing had not put much effort into this aspect. After all, even with her talent, it was not easy to master traceless snow steps. Moreover, this movement technique was not very compatible with him. In layman's terms, it did not match his temperament. If she were to forcefully cultivate it, it would only result in half the effort. A rational and realistic person like Bing Wuqing would certainly not do such a thing. However, Bing Wuqing was a little regretful now. If she had known, she would have spent twice the time to practice it. That way, at least she would not have fallen into such an awkward situation. In a short period of time, he had been left behind by traceless snow steps, and the brainless and frenzied primordial giant lizard had automatically shifted its hatred to him, who was closest to it. I'll go first. You have fun with it. Xue Jianfeng laughed proudly and left. It wasn't that he didn't want to stay and see Bing Wuqing's embarrassed look, but he was well aware of how terrifying Bing Wuqing was. He knew very well that if he were to get carried away and stay, Bing Wuqing would definitely have 100 ways to drag him back into the battle. So, for safety's sake, it was better to leave first. Humph! Can you escape? Bing Wuqing had no choice but to bite the bullet and attack the primordial giant lizard. At the same time, she glanced in the direction that Xue Jianfeng had left in, an indescribable look flickering in her eyes. If someone like Lin Yi, who had an extremely sharp divine sense, had been present, he would have noticed that there was a faintly discernible thread of ice on his fingertip that was connected to the direction that Xue Jianfeng had left in. At the same time, on the other side, Lin, Yi, and the others were rushing towards the direction where Cold and the others were. However, halfway through the journey, the water lily doppelganger that was responsible for leading the way for Lin, he suddenly stopped. "Why did you stop?" Linny frowned. He was in a hurry to meet up with Cold and the others, so he had no time to waste with this fellow. "The group that you're looking for has split up," said the water lily doppelganger. "Did they encounter the spirit beast that you were talking about?" asked Lin E hurriedly. "Yes, a woman stayed behind to delay them, and the rest have safely evacuated." The water lily doppelganger nodded, and then added, "However, their trouble isn't the spirit beast that I was talking about just now, but another human expert. His strength doesn't seem to be simple." "A human expert?" Lin Yi's eyelids twitched. Based on the water lily's experience, someone who could make it praise as having strength that was not simple must be a golden core expert. This time, the only golden core experts who had come in were Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing was on their side, so the one who was making things difficult for Cold and the others could only be Xue Jianfeng. "Oh, that expert has chased that woman to the primordial giant lizard's territory. There's nothing I can do about that." The water lily doppelganger feigned helplessness and spread its hands. "What do you mean? Why can't you do anything about the primordial giant lizard's territory?" Linny glanced at it. This fellow's original body was trapped in the space of the jade pendant, and it would only take a single thought to take its life. There was no need to be afraid that it would play any tricks. "Do you know how I found out about these things?" The water lily doppelganger asked instead of answering. "Aren't you relying on those flowers and trees?" Linny frowned. "That's right. I rely on my primordial spirit to communicate with them to find out about these things. Basically, as long as there are plants, I can grasp every movement, big or small, but only the primordial giant lizard's territory is not within my control." The water lily doppelganger shook its head. "Why?" Duan Muyu asked on its behalf. "Because wherever the primordial giant lizard passes, there will be saliva left behind. Just a little bit of it can strangle the intelligence of all the plants. Then, even if the plants are alive, it's useless because without intelligence, there's no way to communicate with them. Naturally, they're out of my control." The water lily doppelganger's expression was quite sincere when it said this, and there was no sign of it lying. "Plants also have intelligence." Fei Yangsheng came over and asked curiously. "Of course, as long as the plants have a bit of climate, they will have intelligence. As for those elixirs in your eyes, they're even more outstanding. Otherwise, how could they gather so much spiritual qi of heaven and earth to nourish them?" The water lily doppelganger asked in return. Upon hearing the word elixirs, Fei Yangsheng's face immediately turned gloomy. The 2 bags of elixirs that he had painstakingly collected in the underground had already been thrown away when he encountered the Kappa. Now that he had come out of the treasure mountain empty-handed, it really pained him to think about it. The main reason was that he was worried about the safety of Cold and the others, so he didn't bother to accompany him back to the treasure mountain. Moreover, he didn't dare to go back alone, so he could only silently bleed in his heart. "What are you going to do?" Duan Muyu looked at Lin E and asked. Linny pondered for a moment. He was sure that it was Cold who was holding Xue Jianfeng back. He thought for a moment and said, "Other than that girl, are the others in any danger?" "Not really. It seems that if there are no accidents, we should be able to reach the river of consciousness smoothly." The water lily doppelganger smiled mysteriously. "If that's the case, then bring me to the primordial giant lizard's territory now." Linny decided immediately. Since Ling Shan and the others were not in danger, there was nothing to worry about. The most important thing now was to hurry and save Cold. Chapter 5280. Is it very strong? He was slightly taken aback. He had never heard of an ancient monitor lizard, but since even an existence like the brain-eating bug did not dare to step into its territory, there was no doubt about its strength. "It is indeed very strong." The ancient monitor lizard is recognized as one of the 10 most terrifying spirit beasts in the Archaic Alliance. Legend has it that unless it is a nascent soul-old monster, all human cultivators must avoid it. Duanmu, you confirmed. It's fine if it's just powerful, but in this place, apart from that, sir, the brain-eating bug and I are the most powerful. It's at most on par with us. There's another more important reason why no one is willing to provoke it. It's brainless. The water lily doppelganger snickered. No brains. Lenny glanced at it. The most terrifying thing about the ancient monitor lizard is its saliva. It is almost the most terrifying and evil saliva in the world. Those with a weak physique will die if they touch it. Even if their physique is strong enough, they can only linger on and become a tuberculosis ghost, never to be a normal person again. Perhaps it is affected by its own saliva. The ancient monitor lizard is completely a brainless lunatic. There is no way to communicate with it. Otherwise, it might be on an equal footing with me and the brain-eating bug, the water lily doppelganger said casually. So strange? All the more reason for me to go and see. Lenny made up his mind and then looked at Duanmu Yu and said, since Miss Duanmu is going to the river of divine knowledge, then let's say goodbye. The ancient monitor lizard was so terrifying. He had to take the risk for cold. Otherwise, even he would not be willing to deal with such a thing. Duanmu Yu was just a chance acquaintance, so naturally, she would not take the risk. He took the initiative to say this to give the other party a way out, so as to avoid embarrassment. Unexpectedly, Duanmu Yu said, we can go to the river of divine knowledge anytime. It is rare to have the opportunity to see the glory of the ancient monitor lizard. I want to go with you. Brother Lin, you don't mind, right? He took a deep look at her. He knew that Duanmu Yu wanted to take this opportunity to return the favor. After all, he had done her a great favor. After thinking for a while, he smiled and said, in that case, let's go together. He was just about to have his water lily clone lead the way to the primordial monitor lizard's territory when Fei Yangsheng suddenly put on a sheepish smile. Senior, I'll only be a burden to you if I go with you. Why don't I not go? As you wish. He waved his hand. Duanmu, you might still be able to help, but with Fei Yangyang's meager strength, facing an existence like the primordial giant lizard, he would only be sending himself to his death. Not only would he not be able to help, he would even be a hindrance to Lin. Forcing him to follow them was no different from sending him to his death, so it was better for him to stay. Yes. Thank you for your understanding, Senior. Have a safe journey. Fei Yangyang was overjoyed. He was afraid that he would make him follow them as cannon fodder. He didn't expect to be so easygoing. Although it was extremely dangerous for him to move alone in the dense forest with his meager strength, it was better than sending himself to his death in the primordial giant lizard's territory. As long as he was careful and didn't think too much about treasures, he should be able to keep his life. He couldn't be bothered to argue with such a small character. He immediately let his water lily clone lead the way and set off with Duanmu Yu to the primordial giant lizard's territory. Meanwhile, Fei Yangyang took the map given by Exine Ijia and studied it for a long time, then walked in the direction of the river of divine knowledge. Moving alone, Fei Yangyang was careful with every step he took. If there was even the slightest movement, he would immediately find a place to hide. Although this was a little too cautious, the advantage was that he wouldn't die easily. After all, safety came first. 2 hours later, Fei Yangyang suddenly stopped in his tracks. He felt that his surroundings were a little too quiet. He didn't care whether there was any danger or not. He quickly hid behind the trunk of a nearby tree. His intuition was right. In a short while, he sensed a powerful aura approaching from afar. However, it wasn't a spirit beast, but Xue Jianfeng. At this time, Xue Jianfeng had already shaken off Bing Wuqing and the primordial giant lizard. When he passed by this area, he suddenly appeared in front of Fei Yangyang. With Fei Yangyang's meager strength, it was impossible for him to hide from Xue Jianfeng's divine knowledge. Xue, senior brother Xue. Oh no, master's uncle Xue. Fei Yangyang was so shocked that he stuttered. Why are you here? Xue Jianfeng looked him up and down. Is it strange that I'm here? Fei Yangyang couldn't help but be stunned. Everyone was heading to the river of divine knowledge, and he was walking in this direction. Wasn't this normal? Of course it's strange. If I'm not mistaken, you should have been eaten by that plant spirit beast. Tell me, how did you escape? Xue Jianfeng's eyes narrowed into slits. You? How did you know? Fei Yangyang was shocked. He had never seen Xue Jianfeng before. Xue Jianfeng coldly snorted and said, "Nonsense. The path you chose must have passed through that plant spirit beast territory. Even I had to expend a tremendous amount of effort to escape. With your insignificant strength, how could you have made it this far alive? Have you fought with the water lily protector before?" It was only then that Fei Yangsheng realized that Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng had set off earlier than him. Judging from Xue Jianfeng's words, he must have chosen the same path as him and Duan Muyu, and must have experienced some extremely dangerous situations, which was why he had such a question. Water lily protector? Xue Jianfeng frowned and muttered to himself, "So that thing's true form is a water lily. How could it be a water lily that can control so many powerful plants to surround me at the same time? So you haven't seen its true form?" Fei Yangyang was stunned again. He had thought that Xue Jianfeng had fought directly with a water lily protector like Lin Yi. He didn't expect that he had only fought indirectly with the plants controlled by the water lily protector. He couldn't help but feel a bit of contempt in his heart. From the looks of it, Xue Jianfeng had at most fought with something similar to the twin piranha flower, while Lin Yi had actually taken down the water lily protector's true form. The difference between the two was obvious. Admittedly, Xue Jianfeng was a high and mighty golden core expert. To Fei Yangyang, he was a high and mighty existence that he could only look up to. However, a heaven-defying expert like Lin Yi could simply ignore the level suppression. The fact that he could take down the water lily protector proved everything. Therefore, there was no doubt that Lin Yi was stronger than Xue Jianfeng. Chapter 52-81. You've seen it? Then how did you survive? Xue Jianfeng looked at him suspiciously. Of course I've seen it, but I was lucky enough to meet Senior Lin Yi, and he saved me. Fei Yangxing's tone involuntarily revealed a bit of pride and even a bit of bragging. After all, apart from Lung Lung and the others, there were not many people who could be saved by Lin Yi, which was also a rare honor. Lin? Would he take the initiative to save you? Xue Jianfeng glanced at him with a bit of disbelief in his eyes. He knew that Fei Yangsheng had some relationship with Lin Yi, but in his opinion, it was purely Lin Yi who forced Fei Yangsheng to do hard labor for him. He did not believe that Fei Yangsheng was one of Lin Yi's people, or else he would have punished this guy long ago. Of course, Fei Yangsheng said shamelessly. Although it was true that Lin Yi saved him, it was purely a coincidence. If Lin Yi knew that he was trapped by the Bingdi piranha flower from the beginning, he might not have wasted time for him at all. This was simply Fei Yangsheng's wishful thinking. Xue Jianfeng was dubious. He did not believe Fei Yangsheng's words, but it was a fact that this guy was safe and sound. He said with a faint smile, "So you have a good relationship with Lin Yi?" About the same. Fei Yangsheng was a little guilty at this time. It was not because he was guilty of making friends with Lin Yi, but because he remembered that Xue Jianfeng and Lin Yi were not on good terms. What if Lin Yi killed him to vent his anger? He would not be able to escape with his little strength. In that case, follow me first. Maybe Lin Yi will come to you in a while. Xue Jianfeng thought for a while and said, follow you? Fei Yangsheng was shocked. If it was before, he would definitely want to hug Xue Jianfeng's leg in this kind of place. But now he had automatically attached the label of Lin Yi to make himself look better. Would it be good to follow Xue Jianfeng at this time? You're not willing? Xue Jianfeng squinted at him. It's not that I'm unwilling, but what does it have to do with you whether Senior Lin Yi comes to find me or not? Fei Yangsheng muttered suspiciously. He didn't know what the other party was planning, but he couldn't help but feel uneasy. Cut the crap. Are you leaving or not? Xue Jianfeng glared. Let's go. I'll go with you. Fei Yangsheng was taken aback. He didn't dare to argue with Xue Jianfeng face to face. Moreover, It wasn't like there were no benefits for him to follow Xue Jianfeng. At the very least, he wouldn't fall into the mouths of other spirit beasts, and his safety would be guaranteed. However, in private, Fei Yangsheng couldn't help but complain in his heart. This guy must have some ulterior motives for bringing him along. When Senior Lin Yi came later, he would kill him. So what if he was a gold core expert? Even Lung Lung almost couldn't defeat him last time, let alone Senior Lin Yi. Senior Lin Yi could even subdue the Water Lotus Protector. You, Xue Jianfeng, are nothing. After taking 2 steps, Fei Yangsheng suddenly asked, where are we going? Do you still need to ask? Of course, we're going to the River of Divine Knowledge, Xue Jianfeng said, and took the lead to walk forward. With his strength, he naturally didn't need to be as careful as Fei Yangsheng. Unless it was an existence like the ancient giant lizard, ordinary spirit beasts wouldn't even have time to hide from him. If it didn't have eyes, the black praying mantis would be a good example. Fei Yangsheng was a little worried that Xue Jianfeng would bring him to some dangerous place, but when he heard it was the River of Divine Knowledge, he was immediately relieved. The two of them walked toward the River of Divine Knowledge one after the other. They walked peacefully for 4 to 6 hours. Suddenly, Xue Jianfeng, who was walking in front, was stunned. Then, his expression changed drastically. What the hell? Why do they chase us here? Who? Fei Yangsheng asked cautiously. He couldn't help but feel happy in his heart. He thought Xue Jianfeng was talking about Lin Yi and Duanmuyu. Good luck to you. Xue Jianfeng laughed coldly. In a flash, he was about to shake off Fei Yangsheng and leave alone. Snow prints appeared under his feet. He had used the traceless snow steps. Before Fei Yangsheng could figure out what was going on, he heard a loud rumbling sound coming from afar. In a moment, it was right in front of him. When he saw clearly who was causing this huge commotion, he was instantly scared out of his wits. With a pale face, he stammered, "Th, primordial giant lizard." It wasn't just the primordial giant lizard. Bing Wuqing had also appeared. Compared to before, Bing Wuqing was obviously in a much more difficult situation. The primordial giant lizard had more than 10 wounds, both shallow and deep. It was in an even more violent state than before. It couldn't be helped. The primordial giant lizard was too fast. Bing Wuqing couldn't shake it off even with her merciless ice force. Every time, she could only stall it for a while before escaping on her own. Then, the primordial giant lizard would chase after her relentlessly. Bing Wuqing would try to stall it for a while. This cycle repeated all the way until they were here. Logically speaking, every spiritual beast had their own territory. Apart from a few special reasons, these spiritual beasts rarely left their territories. That was because doing so would be equivalent to openly declaring war against other spiritual beasts. Bing Wuqing thought that she would be fine as long as she escaped from the primordial giant lizard's territory. However, it turned out that she had been overthinking. This primordial giant lizard didn't care about these miscellaneous things at all. It was just stubbornly chasing after her. The other spiritual beasts didn't even dare to stop it when they saw it. They weren't stupid. If they encountered such a brainless and ferocious beast, they wouldn't even have the time to escape. Who would dare to come forward and seek death? Xue Jianfeng escaped first. When Fei Yangsheng saw this, he was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly. He fell to the ground on the spot. He clenched his teeth for a long time before he staggered to his feet and retreated. It was fortunate that the primordial giant lizard's attention had been on Bing Wuqing. Otherwise, with his jelly legs, he would have died a dozen times over if he had been caught in the crossfire. It's fortunate that I don't have much of a presence. Otherwise, my life would have been forfeit today. Fei Yangsheng rejoiced as he retreated. However, he didn't have time to rejoice for long. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain on his back, as if he had been cut by a knife. He quickly turned to look, only to find that ice threads had formed out of thin air behind him. They were as dense as a spider's web, thin, transparent, and unusually sharp. Chapter 5282. Fei Yangsheng hurriedly took out a short knife. This was a treasure he had obtained by chance during a trial in his early years. It was indestructible and could cut through iron like mud. However, when his short knife sliced through the ice threads, he did not encounter any resistance at all. What made Fei Yongsheng dumbfounded was that after the short knife sliced through, the ice threads did not break. They were still hanging in the air, undamaged. Fei Yongsheng was dumbfounded for a moment before he suddenly realized that these ice threads were not solid ice threads at all. They were formed by the condensation of divine senses. No wonder his skin and flesh did not break when he touched them, and he did not bleed. Fei Yongsheng was not the only one who was obstructed by the ice threads. Even Xue Jianfeng, who had left first, was forced to retreat. He looked at Bing Wuqing with an ugly expression and asked, "What is the meaning of this?" "Nothing. I just intend to finish it off here. Don't you want to join the fun?" Bing Wuqing said expressionlessly. Without a doubt, these ice threads formed by the divine senses were handiwork. "Do you think you can trap me with this little trick?" Xue Jianfeng snorted coldly. "Whether you can trap me or not, you've already tried it, haven't you?" Bing Wuqing gave a rare grin as she dodged the primordial giant lizard's attack. Xue Jianfeng's expression immediately turned even uglier. Indeed, as Bing Wuqing had said, he had already tried it just now. If he could get rid of those divine sense ice threads, he wouldn't have come back at all. The key was that these divine sense ice threads had already surrounded the entire place without leaving any blind spots. This place had already become an out-and-out cage. It was obvious that Bing Wuqing did not want to deal with the primordial giant lizard alone. Unless the two of them worked together to finish off this brainless beast, Xue Jianfeng would not be able to leave this place. "Is this your new move?" Xue Jianfeng asked in a low voice. "Of course not," Bing Wuqing replied calmly. Bing Wuqing replied impassively. She had learned this move a long time ago. It was just that she had been limited by her abilities in the past, and the most she had been able to do was to create some scattered strands. She had been unable to weave a densely packed cage of ice silk like she was doing now. "What is it?" Xue Jianfeng asked again. "Merciless ice threads." Bing Wuqing didn't hide anything. This was an ultimate move that was derived from the Merciless Ice Force. All along, she had focused her cultivation on the Merciless Ice Force, and all the moves she had cultivated were based on it. It was the same for the Merciless Ice Threads. Xue Jianfeng did not say another word. Although his abilities were no longer below Bing Wuqing's on the surface, he had progressed too quickly after all, and one of the unavoidable drawbacks was his lack of foundation. He was still unable to master many of the powers at the level of Golden Core perfected, especially when it came to Divine Sense, which was a huge weakness. Therefore, these merciless ice threads formed from Divine Sense could be said to be helpless. Although Wuqing had made her abilities quickly, she was still in the early stage of the merciless Golden Spirit. And Bing Wuqing Bing Wuqing was had much better. At this moment, the primordial giant lizard, Bing Wuqing, Xue Jianfeng, and Fei Yongsheng were all trapped in the cage of ice threads. The palm-sized space had become an open-air arena. Either the primordial giant lizard would die, or all three of them would die together. There was no other outcome. Strictly speaking, the cage of ice threads could trap Xue Jianfeng and Fei Yongsheng, but not Bing Wuqing herself. However, it would take some effort for him to pass through the merciless ice threads. Obviously, Xue Jianfeng would not give him the chance to escape. Although the primordial giant lizard was frightening, if Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng could work together sincerely, it would not be too much trouble for them. Unfortunately, the two of them had their own ulterior motives. It was already noble of them not to cause trouble for each other. From the beginning to the end, they had only been doing one thing, and that was to find a way to transfer the primordial giant lizard's hatred to each other. However, what was surprising was that Fei Yongsheng managed to survive in such an environment. It was probably because his abilities were too weak. Even if he tried hard to transfer the primordial giant lizard's hatred to him, it would not last for more than a few seconds. Therefore, Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng subconsciously treated him as if he was invisible, and he managed to escape. After half an hour, the battle had completely entered a white-hot stage. Because of the mutual shirking, Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng were completely at a disadvantage against the primordial giant lizard. Both of them were covered in dirt, while the primordial giant lizard was becoming more and more ferocious. If this continued, the two of them might end up as the primordial giant lizard's food. Brothers, stop fooling around. Can't you deal with this lizard first before you fight amongst yourselves? Otherwise, we're all going to die. Fei Yongsheng shouted anxiously at the side. If Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng were defeated, he would not survive either. Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng looked at each other. They knew that they could not go on like this. It would be a joke if they died here together. Bing Wuqing took the lead and said, "You hold it back. I'll be the main attacker." "All right." Xue Jianfeng agreed immediately. He had a high-level movement technique like traceless snow steps, so it was not difficult for him to hold the primordial giant lizard back for a short period of time. Furthermore, it did not take much effort for him to do so. On the other hand, Bing Wuqing, who was the main attacker, was more physically draining, so he had the upper hand. The two of them worked together, and the results were immediate. Once Xue Jianfeng had completely attracted the primordial giant lizard's attention, Bing Wuqing gathered her strength for a moment and suddenly struck. She used her palm as a blade, and cold air surged from it, quickly condensing into an extremely thin dark blue ice blade. She aimed it at the primordial giant lizard and slashed it down. Merciless slash. The primordial giant lizard's reaction was not slow, and it quickly dodged when it sensed the danger. Unfortunately, its huge body became an absolute burden at this moment. No matter how fast it was, it could not completely evade the attack, and the dark blue ice blade hit its tail squarely. Previously, Xue Jianfeng's full-powered slash had not been able to break through the defense of its silver-gray scales. However, this time, it was Bing Wuqing's merciless slash that severed its entire tail. Blood splattered everywhere, and the lizard howled in pain. "It's done!" Fei Yongsheng was overjoyed at the sight, but he was immediately dumbfounded. Not only did the primordial giant lizard not collapse after its tail was severed, it became even more berserk than before, going on a rampage even more thoroughly. "Fuck, it's not dead even after that?" Xue Jianfeng was caught off guard, and he was sent flying by Claw. Fortunately, the lizard's saliva did not touch him, or he would have been dead. Chapter 5283. Faced with such a ferocious beast that did not conform to common sense, everyone was at a loss. If Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng had joined forces, they might have had a chance of winning. But the problem was that it was already rare for them to work together. Xue Jianfeng had suffered a great loss this time, and it was impossible for him to restrain the even more violent primordial giant lizard. The situation took a turn for the worse, and everyone was in a precarious situation. If this continued, they would all be wiped out and buried in the primordial giant lizard's bloody mouth. At this moment, three figures appeared in front of everyone. Fei Yongsheng was overjoyed to see them. They were none other than Lin Yi, Duanmu Yu, and the water lily clone who was in charge of leading the way. Because the water lily clone couldn't communicate with the plants that had been contaminated by the primordial monitor lizard saliva, the only way for them to find the primordial monitor lizard's whereabouts was to use the elimination method to calculate the primordial monitor lizard's territory, and then try their luck there. If they had to rely on this stupid method, it would have taken them at least a day to find the primordial giant lizard. Fortunately, Bing Wuqing had lured the primordial giant lizard out, and they had calculated its location based on the plants that they had lost contact with. Lin Yi glanced around and frowned. He had thought that the primordial giant lizard was chasing after cold, but there was no cold here at all. Instead, he saw Bing Wuqing and the other two. "Senior, save us!" Fei Yongsheng hurriedly shouted. Ever since he had subdued the water lily protector, Lin Yi was almost invincible in his eyes. In his opinion, as long as Lin Yi attacked, the primordial giant lizard would not be a problem. He's just a foundation building great completion. What's the use? Xue Jianfeng was full of disdain. Even he and Bing Wuching, two gold core great completion cultivators, had been tormented by the primordial giant lizard. What use would Lin Yi be? Lin Yi did not comment. If the primordial giant lizard had only targeted Xue Jianfeng, he would not have given it a second glance. But Bing Wuching was here. She was his people, and he could not ignore her. You want to save them? Duanmu Yu was a little hesitant. She did not know about the relationship between Bing Wuching and Lin Yi. She only knew that both Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuching had a grudge against Lin Yi. There was no need for him to risk his life to save them. After all, the primordial giant lizard was no joke. It's nothing. It's nothing. As Lin Yi spoke, his figure flashed as he charged forward. Be careful of the ice threads. Bing Wuching hurriedly reminded him, but before she could finish, Lin Yi had already disappeared without a trace. When he reappeared in the next instant, he was already inside the ice cage, riding on the head of the berserk primordial giant lizard. This scene caused everyone's eyelids to twitch. That was a primordial monitor lizard. Just a little bit of its saliva, and it would be finished. Wasn't Lin Yi a little too daring? You're courting death. You're still trying to act tough at a time like this. Xue Jianfeng snorted disdainfully. Even a golden core perfected expert like him would not dare to be so arrogant. It was obvious that Lin Yi was trying to act tough in front of Duanmu Yu. Otherwise, why would he be riding on the head of the primordial giant lizard for no reason? However, Lin Yi ignored him. He grabbed the primordial giant lizard's head with one hand. Everyone thought that he was going to use some powerful martial arts technique, but unexpectedly, his entire hand sank into the head without any resistance. The scene was rather strange. After a while, the furious primordial giant lizard suddenly quieted down. Lin Yi slowly withdrew his hand, and when it was completely withdrawn, everyone realized that there was a ring of something gray on his hand. What is that? Fei Yangshan could not help but ask. Primordial spirit. Bing Wuching and Xue Jianfeng gasped at the same time. Lin Yi had actually grabbed the primordial giant lizard's primordial spirit out, and the whole process was so easy. It was simply unimaginable. It's done. Lin Yi casually tossed the ball of primordial spirit in his hand into the space in the jade pendant, and then clapped his hands as if nothing had happened. It gave the impression that he had not dealt with a ferocious beast like the primordial giant lizard, but rather that he had casually picked up a piece of trash. That was all. Everyone looked at each other, and the whole place was dead silent. Apart from the sound of gulping, no one could say a word for a long while. Looking at the primordial giant lizard lying motionless on the ground, Xue Jianfeng swallowed hard. He looked at Lin Yi in shock and stammered. How? How did you do it? Lin Yi glanced at him. He said calmly, It's just a brainless spirit beast. Is it that difficult? It's very difficult, Bing Wuching said seriously. Xue Jianfeng and Duanmu Yu had the same expression. It was true that the primordial giant lizard was an extremely brainless spirit beast. While its individual strength was incomparably strong, its primordial spirit was in stark contrast to its incomparably weak primordial spirit. It was no exaggeration to say that the primordial giant lizard, which was superior to most golden elixir perfected experts, had a primordial spirit that could not even compare to an ordinary person's. It might even be weaker than a 3-year-old child's. Even so, a primordial spirit was not something that could be pulled out easily. Unless the primordial spirit left its body on its own accord, no matter how weak the primordial spirit was, as long as it hid in its body, it would still be impregnable. At least to everyone's knowledge, there had never been such a case. To give a simple example, golden elixir perfected experts like Bing Wuching and Xue Jianfeng could easily kill a bunch of ordinary people with a flick of their fingers. However, it was impossible for them to pull out an ordinary person's primordial spirit out of thin air. Even if it was a nascent soul-old monster, it would be hard to say. The most difficult part was how to completely cut off the connection between the primordial spirit and the body. This connection was inextricably linked and inseparable. It was just like when a person was on Earth, they would inevitably be firmly bound by gravity at all times. Wanting to completely separate a primordial spirit from its body was equivalent to throwing a person directly into space from the surface of the earth. Only then could one truly break free from gravity. One had to know that Lin Yi himself was only a primordial spirit. He did not have a booster like a rocket. No matter how strong he was, it was impossible for him to throw a person into space with his bare hands, right? However, the reality was right there. No one knew how Lin Yi had done it, but he had indeed done it. Just thinking about the meaning of this was enough to make one shudder. Chapter 5284. Little did he know that he was overthinking. Lin Yi's technique could only be used on brainless beasts like the ancient giant lizard. It was useless against a golden core expert of his level. Even a foundation establishment expert would not be affected at all, let alone a golden core expert. It could only be used to deal with ordinary people. However, Xue Jianfeng did not know this. He was now like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bow. He was extremely fearful. Even though he was a golden core perfected expert now, his divine sense had not made any substantial progress. It was almost his weakest link, so he had no choice but to be fearful. Seeing Lin Yi's gaze sweep over, Xue Jianfeng immediately shivered. Afraid that he would have evil thoughts, he quickly forced a smile and said, "Thank you for your help." Although he said so, in his heart, he could not wait to quickly think of a way to kill Lin Yi. Biting the hand that feeds him, this guy was a typical ingrate. "No need. I'm not here for you." Lin Yi pursed his lips. "Then, let's part ways here." Xue Jianfeng was extremely cautious when he said this, afraid that Lin Yi would suddenly attack him. Although there was Bing Wuqing, a friend, present, and he did not believe that a foundation establishment perfected expert like Lin Yi could defeat a golden core perfected expert like him, the scene just now was too shocking. This guy could not be calculated with common sense. As expected, Lin Yi had no intention of letting him go just like that. He stretched out his hand to stop him. "Wait, what do you want?" Xue Jianfeng immediately felt as if he was facing a formidable enemy. At the same time, he desperately winked at Bing Wuqing, hoping that she would help him deal with Lin Yi. Even though they had their own ulterior motives when dealing with the ancient giant lizard, they were both members of the organization. He believed that Bing Wuqing would not turn against him over such a matter of principle, because that would be equivalent to betraying the organization. Little did he know, Bing Wuqing was not one of his people at all, but one of Lin Yi's people. He was really thinking too much. "Where's Lung Lung?" Lin Yi stared at him with an unfriendly expression. Although he didn't know what would happen after arriving at the primordial monitor lizard's territory, one thing was certain. Before this, there was no doubt that Xue Jianfeng had been chasing after Lung Lung. It would be fine if Lung Lung was safe and sound, but if anything were to happen to her, Lin Yi would never let Xue Jianfeng off today. "She escaped long ago." Xue Jianfeng hurriedly answered. "Really?" Lin Yi was skeptical. He ordered the water lily clone not far away. "Check it out." Xue Jianfeng was stunned when he heard that. Only now did he finally notice the unfamiliar face beside Duan Muyu, and he couldn't help but be secretly surprised. Where did this person come from? He had more or less an impression of all the disciples who participated in the trial, but there was no such person. Moreover, Lin Yi actually asked him to investigate Lung Lung's matter. How was he supposed to investigate? At this moment, Bing Wuqing stepped forward to testify. "Cole did escape. I saw her leave with my own eyes." "Is that so?" Lin Yi heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't have to think to know that it was Bing Wuqing who saved Lung Lung from Xue Jianfeng's hands. At this moment, the water lily clone also said, "That woman escaped safely and has now met up with the group from before." "That's good." Lin Yi nodded. "Can I leave now?" Xue Jianfeng didn't dare to stay any longer. Without waiting for Lin Yi's reply, he quickly retreated. At the same time, he said to Bing Wuqing in dissatisfaction, "Aren't you going to remove your stupid cage?" Bing Wuqing frowned when she heard that and glanced at Lin Yi. Seeing that Lin Yi didn't object, she then waved her hand to remove the merciless ice threads. Shui Jianfeng used the spectral snow steps without hesitation and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. For him, it seemed that the current Lin Yi was far more frightening than the primordial giant lizard. Lin Yi looked thoughtfully at the direction in which this guy had left. Actually, Shui Jianfeng deserved to die 100 times for daring to attack Lung Lung and the others. It was just that Lin Yi's current strength and realm were too low. It was easier said than done to deal with an expert of Golden Core perfected. Of course, it wasn't impossible to really fight. After all, he also had Bing Wuqing, who was of Golden Core perfected, on his side. The key problem was that Lin Yi's current state was like an arrow at the end of its flight. He couldn't do anything. However, Lin Yi didn't show any of it on his face. He still maintained his calm demeanor. He looked at Bing Wuqing and asked, "What's up with this guy? It seems like there's something he can't let us know." Thinking about it carefully, Shui Jianfeng's behavior just now was actually very unusual. It was true that he was shocked by Lin Yi's shocking means, but he was still an expert of Golden Core perfected. Moreover, Bing Wuqing was with him in name. There is absolutely no need for him to be afraid of Lin Yi, and there was no need for him to put on such a fleeing posture. There must be something going on. That's right. Ever since he entered this primordial trial ground, he has been acting suspiciously. I was also very puzzled, so I've been following him. It's just that until now, I still haven't figured out his intentions. Bing Wuqing nodded. It was also because of this that she could save Lung Lung in time. Otherwise, with the primordial trial ground being so huge, how could there be such a coincidence? He didn't notice you? Lin Yi was a little surprised. Both of them were experts of Golden Core perfected. Even if Bing Wuqing had a deeper foundation, she shouldn't have been able to follow them all the way without being noticed. No matter what, Shui Jianfeng wasn't an ordinary person. His senses shouldn't be so slow, right? I have this. Bing Wuqing raised her hand. An invisible ice thread was wrapped around her fingertip, which was connected to the direction that Shui Jianfeng had left. There was no doubt that the other end of the thread was on Shui Jianfeng. No wonder. Lin Yi suddenly understood. With this merciless ice thread as a guide, Bing Wuqing only had to follow far behind. There was no need for her to get close to the other's sensing range. As long as Shui Jianfeng didn't notice this trick, she would never be able to escape his tracking. Then Bing Wuqing consulted. Do as you wish. Continue to keep an eye on him. I happen to be worried about this guy anyway. Lin Yi waved his hand. Since Shui Jianfeng dared to attack Lung Lung and the others, there would be a second time. With Bing Wuqing keeping an eye on him, it would be good to eliminate this hidden danger. Besides, if Bing Wuqing kept following him, it would be troublesome if she was seen by others. All right, Bing Wuqing responded, but she didn't leave immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze to the other people present. The first to bear the brunt was Fei Yangsheng, who was the closest. Chapter 5285. Fei Yangsheng's expression gave Bing Wuqing a clear message. This guy was not Lin Yi's man. Her relationship with Lin Yi could not be exposed yet. So to be safe, she might as well kill him to silence him. Once she was determined to kill, Bing Wuqing's merciless ice aura broke out of her body. Bing Wuqing had always been a clean and efficient person. As long as Lin Yi did not stop her, Fei Yangsheng would not live to see tomorrow's sun. Thump! Fei Yangsheng was so frightened that he knelt on the spot. He hurriedly begged for mercy. Masters Jr., I have admired Senior Lin since a long time ago. On account of the fact that I used to run errands for Senior Lin, please recommend me to join Senior Lin's team. I will go through fire and water and sacrifice my life for him. Fei Yangsheng wasn't an idiot. He'd be going to meet the King of Hell if he didn't show his loyalty now. He called himself Lin Yi's follower just to make himself look good, and he didn't have any qualms about this at all. In fact, it was exactly what he'd been looking for. Bing Wuqing looked at Lin Yi. Lin Yi thought about it and decided that he did not mind having such a little brother. However, he did not trust Fei Yangsheng's character, so he took out a poisonous insect and threw it to him. Eat this. Fei Yangsheng took it without hesitation and swallowed it. Of course, he knew that it was not something good, but he could not hesitate at this moment. Anyway, no matter what poison it was, as long as he did not betray Lin Yi, his life would not be in danger in the short term. Fei Yangsheng passed the test successfully, but Bing Wuqing's eyes fell on Duan Muyu. He did not care whether she was Yi Ling Sek's senior sister or not. If she was not one of them, he would kill her. Duan Muyu was startled. She could clearly feel the murderous intent emanating from Bing Wuqing, and with her current strength, she was completely defenseless in front of the other party. She hurriedly assured them, "Don't worry, I won't go out and tell anyone." Bing Wuqing turned to Lin Yi for advice. To him, such a promise was nonsense. The most untrustworthy thing in the world was an empty promise. Whether Duan Muyu could live or not did not depend on what she swore, but on Lin Yi. "It's fine. Forget about her." Lin Yi thought for a while and waved his hand. His previous experience had given him a good impression of Duan Muyu. Although she was a woman, she was straightforward, a little like a tomboy. Moreover, from the fact that she had come forward to save Fei Yangsheng, whom she had no friendship with, it could be seen that this woman was very loyal. With her character, she would not spread the news. To be honest, in Lin Yi's opinion, Duan Muyu was much more reliable than Fei Yangsheng. Even Fei Yangsheng, who had taken the goo poison and become his underling, might not be as reliable as Duan Muyu, an outsider. Duan Muyu breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Lin Yi with a complicated expression. While he felt that this person was more and more unfathomable, he inexplicably trusted him more. After all, trust was mutual. When someone trusted you, you would naturally have a corresponding sense of trust for that person. Following that, Bing Wuqing's gaze turned towards the water lily clone. However, this time, she didn't have to ask anything. Lin Yi took the initiative and said, "Don't bother about it. That fellow is a spirit beast that I've just subdued." Spirit beast? Bing Wuqing paused for a moment. After a moment, her expression suddenly changed, and she said in shock, "Could it be the mastermind behind those plants?" He had followed Xue Jianfeng all the way here. Xue Jianfeng had suffered at the hands of those plants, so naturally, he was no exception. Even now, he was still a little frightened by the dangers involved. "That's right. Let me introduce you. This is the water lily protector of this place." Lin Yi smiled faintly. Its true form is actually a water lily. How rare. Bing Wuqing's reaction was exactly the same as Xue Jianfeng's. You and a human expert from just now are quite strong. However, you escaped because I didn't really make a move. Otherwise, you wouldn't have survived until now, the water lily protector said with a disdainful expression. This was the truth. Unless Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng could crack the mirage reflection and find its true form like Lin Yi did. And at the same time, they had to have a method like the space in the jade pendant to imprison its true form so that its rippleless ancient well would lose its effect. Otherwise, no matter how many experts in Golden Core Great Attainment came, it would be useless. Bing Wuqing was skeptical about this, but deep down, her respect for Lin Yi grew. After all, other things aside, the water lily protector's strength was undeniable. Lin Yi could even subdue such a spirit beast. There was really no one else with such skills. "Then I'll leave first." Bing Wuqing bade farewell to Lin Yi and was about to leave right away. "Wait a minute, bring Fei Yangsheng along. It's not convenient for him to follow me, and he happens to be from your Snow Sword sect. No one will suspect anything if he follows you," Lin Yi instructed. "All right." Bing Wuqing nodded, glanced at Fei Yangsheng, and said, "Follow closely. Don't blame me if you get lost." Yes, I'll definitely follow closely," Fei Yangsheng hurriedly said. Since Lin Yi had spoken, he had to follow Bing Wuqing closely, even if it meant risking his life. Otherwise, if he was really left alone, how could he leave this damned place alive, where danger lurked everywhere? Bing Wuqing immediately left with Fei Yangsheng. Now, only Lin Yi, Duan Muyu, and the water lily clone were left. Duan Muyu asked, "What do you plan to do next? Continue to look for Kuld and the others, or go directly to the river of divine knowledge?" Go to the river of divine knowledge. Anyway, they're heading towards the river of divine knowledge, so it'll be easier to find them there. Lenny paused and then said, "But you have to wait for me to recover first." Recover what? Duan Miyu did not understand for a moment. But Lin Yi did not speak and directly stored the water lily clone into the space in the jade pendant. Then he laughed bitterly and said, "I'm injured." Injured? When? Duan Miyu was shocked. Since coming out of the water lily protector's nest, she had been with Lin Yi the whole time. Apart from easily subduing the primordial giant lizard's primordial spirit, she had not seen him make a move. Just now, as Lin Yi spoke, he had already sat down cross-legged. Then something appeared in his hand. It was the water droplet that he had obtained from the kappa, which was specially used to heal the primordial spirit. Duan Miyu didn't have a clue what was going on. Lin Yi had looked like he was dealing with the ancient giant lizard with ease, and it had only been one hit from start to finish. The lizard didn't show any signs of resistance at all. So how was it injured? You want to know? Lin Yi relied on the water droplet to heal his primordial spirit as he looked up at her. Chapter 5286. The move I use to restrain the primordial giant lizard's primordial spirit is called the soul hooking hand, Lin Yi said truthfully. Soul hooking hand? Hearing this word, Duan Miyu felt an inexplicable chill run down her spine, and she could not help but say, "Why does it sound like a move of a heretic cultivator?" That's right, this is a move of a heretic cultivator. I was once chased by an extremely powerful heretic cultivator on Heaven Stage Island. He wanted to use the soul hooking hand to restrain my primordial spirit and then turn me into a puppet, Lin Yi said with a smile. He was talking about the West Mountain Sect Master. Since it's a move of a heretic cultivator, why do you also know it? Are you also a heretic cultivator? Duan Miyu subconsciously took a step back. Heretic cultivators were not only present on Heaven Stage Island, but also in the ancient Jianghu. Moreover, there were also existences that everyone wanted to kill. Do you think I'm a heretic cultivator? Lin Yi was a little speechless. No. Duan Miyu shook her head decisively. She had seen everything that Lin Yi had done. Although his various methods were unfathomable, they were completely different from being a heretic cultivator. If even Lin Yi was a heretic cultivator, then there would be a sea of heretic cultivators in this world. Then that's it. Lin Yi curled his lips. But since you're not a heretic cultivator, how do you know the moves of a heretic cultivator expert? Duan Miyu was puzzled. I have a deep impression of the soul hooking hand. During this period of time, I just happened to be in the primordial spirit state and coincidentally encountered a bottleneck. Since I had nothing to do anyway, I began to explore all kinds of messy divine sense skills and more or less gain some results. Lin Yi said, "So, you learned the soul hooking hand?" Duan Miyu was dumbfounded. Although she had already seen Lin Yi's amazing insight when he was dealing with the Water Lotus Protector, in her knowledge, no matter how talented a super genius was, he had to learn any martial arts from the beginning. How could he figure it out by himself after seeing someone use it once? At the very least, it wouldn't be a problem if it was in the small Jianghu of immemorial era. After all, the top experts in the small Jianghu of immemorial era were only nascent soul old monsters. If they were compared to the schools in the secular world, they would at most be at the level of junior high school, and they would only be at the basic level. Students at this level would naturally need to learn step by step, and no matter how talented they were, they wouldn't be able to come up with any new tricks. But Lin Yi was different. He was a mysterious ascending stage master, and he was able to kill a mountain opening stage master. He was a genius among geniuses. Even if he wasn't a proper university student, he was at least a high school student. Different levels, naturally different horizons. Junior high school geniuses were at most able to learn quickly and well, but high school geniuses had already entered the level of knowing an answer and being able to reverse deduce a whole set of answers on their own. I can't say that I've completely learned it. At most, it's just a beginner's understanding of it. Lin Yi said it very modestly, but it wasn't a lie, because what he had figured out now was at most an incomplete version of the soul hooking hand, and its power was far less powerful and terrifying than the Shishan Old Master. Not only could the target not be higher than the Foundation establishment stage, but more importantly, every time he used it, he would suffer an extremely serious spirit backlash. If it weren't for the water droplets that were specially used to heal the spirit, Lin, he wouldn't dare to use it at all. Even so, Duan Muyu was shocked speechless. What kind of freak was this? You? Why are you willing to tell me this? Duan Muyu asked hesitantly. Not only the current soul hooking hand, but also the space in the jade pendant. These were all Lin Yi's secrets. Logically speaking, unless it was someone closest to him, according to the usual rules of the cultivation world, he would not reveal it to outsiders, even if he was beaten to death. Why would he take the initiative to tell him this? Lin, he thought about it very seriously, then shrugged indifferently and said, "No reason. I just feel that you're a reliable person, so I came to you on a whim." "Do you really trust me that much?" Duan Muyu couldn't help but ask in surprise. "Are you not worthy of my trust?" Lin, he asked rhetorically. Duan Muyu choked for a long time, then shook his head speechlessly and said, "I really can't see through you." The more powerful a person was, the more shrewd they were. This was human nature, but he didn't expect Lin Yi to be completely different. This guy seemed to be born to break common sense. No matter what he did, he was always so unexpected and subversive. Wouldn't it be troublesome if I was so easily seen through by others? Lin Yi chuckled. As he spoke, the water droplet in his hand had completely evaporated. To be precise, it was absorbed by him. Lin Yi immediately stood up, full of energy. His condition was much better than before he was injured. Not only was his injury completely healed, but he also seemed to have made some progress. However, it was only a slight improvement. He was still far from breaking through the barrier of the great perfection of the Foundation establishment stage. TSK, this water droplet is really good stuff. If it weren't for the fact that the Kappa tribe was almost exterminated by that bastard guardian lotus, I might have been able to get a few more. What a pity. Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh. Don't you still have a holy water droplet? Duan Muyu glanced at him. Now that the guardian lotus had fallen into Lin Yi's hands, the holy water droplet in its hand naturally fell into Lin Yi's hands. It originally wanted to use the holy water droplet to bargain and regain its freedom. Unfortunately, it was trapped in the space of the jade pendant and didn't have the right to do so. Lin Yi took out the holy water droplet with just a thought. How could it bargain? Yes, but it's still a pity, isn't it? With a wave of his hand, Lin Yi took out the holy water droplet. He held in his hand and looked it up and down carefully. Although the crack was a pity, the flaw did not obscure the beauty. The purity and holiness it exuded was still intoxicating. One holy water droplet is worth at least dozens or even hundreds of ordinary water droplets. You're really greedy, Duan Muyu commented. She didn't have any ulterior motives for the holy water droplet. After all, her need for it was far less urgent than Lin Yi's. Moreover, it was the spoil of war from subduing the guardian lotus, so it should belong to Lin Yi alone. Everyone in the world is greedy. What's so strange about me being greedy? Lin Yi smiled, then looked at the holy water droplet and muttered thoughtfully, "Ordinary water droplets can help me improve while healing my injuries. If it's the holy water droplet, will it help me break through the barrier and advance to the gold core stage?" You want to advance to the gold core stage? Duan Muyu looked surprised again. Don't you want to? Lin Yi asked. Chapter 5287. I'm a primordial spirit, so my situation is different from yours. I can't explain it clearly in a few words. Lin Yi smiled bitterly and shook his head while studying the holy water bead. It was true that the effect of the holy water bead was hundreds of times better than ordinary water beads, but could not change its nature of healing primordial spirit injuries. The little improvement just now could only be regarded as a side effect. Based on this, even if he used the holy water bead, there was more than an 80% chance that he would not be able to step into the gold core stage. No matter how he studied various primordial spirit methods, stopping at the Foundation establishment great perfection was a big problem. Duanmu wanted to say something, but hesitated. However, when she thought about it, Lin trusted her so sincerely, it did not seem right to hide it. However, this matter was confidential, and this kind of thing could not be disclosed to outsiders. Even fellow disciples had to guard against each other, let alone an outsider like Lin Yi. What's wrong? Do you have something to say? Lin Yi looked at her with a little surprise. You? Duanmu gritted her teeth. If it was someone else, she would never say it casually, but as Lin Yi said, she was a loyal person. Not only did Lin Yi save her in danger, but he also trusted her so much. It would be unreasonable if she did not return the favor. Finally, she blurted out, "Do you know about the Divine Knowledge Grass?" Divine Knowledge Grass? Lin Yi was stunned and then shook his head. What is that? A very unique elixir. It is said that it only grows near the river of divine knowledge. It is a top-grade elixir used to refine the divine sense. After taking it, it can refine the divine sense and make it reborn. It can even be used to refine the strongest gold core stage master. Duanmu could not hide the excitement and yearning on her face. The strongest gold core stage? Lin Yi could not help but be a little surprised and could not help but say, "Is the strongest gold core stage master of the ancient small Jianghu refined acquired?" Yes. Duanmu took it for granted. Seeing Lin Yi's strange expression, he asked, "Is there a problem?" "There's no problem, but it's different from the Heaven Stage Island. Whether you can become the strongest gold core stage in the Heaven Stage Island is completely determined by the breakthrough process, and the most important thing is to refine the body, not the divine sense. It seems that it's a completely different branch from the small Jianghu in the immemorial era." Lin Yi said thoughtfully. One was to cultivate the fleshly body, while the other was to cultivate the divine sense. Although the two had different Daos, to some extent they had the same result. They were both experts of the gold core stage. Refine your body? What about divine sense? Duanmu had a strange look on his face. In the beginning, the Heaven Stage Island didn't pay much attention to spiritual sense cultivation. Basically, those below the nascent soul stage wouldn't go and cultivate it. Only when you reach a sufficiently high level will you pay attention to it. Of course, if it's a special mental cultivation method or a coincidence, then it's a different story. Lin Yi explained, only those above the nascent soul stage can cultivate their divine sense? How can we make it in time? Duanmu was stunned. As far as she knew, the nascent soul old monster was already the top existence. According to what Lin Yi said, wouldn't it mean that most people didn't need to cultivate their divine sense? No, there are still a lot of realms above the nascent soul stage waiting to be broken through. Moreover, on the Heaven Stage Island, there are many experts above the nascent soul stage. This is normal. Lin Yi didn't think there was anything wrong with this statement. Instead, he was a little surprised by Duanmu's reaction. Is it much earlier in the ancient small world? Duanmu was completely stunned by his words. There were still a lot of realms above the nascent soul stage, and the experts of that level were as many as the hairs on a cow. This almost completely subverted her understanding. After a while, Duanmu came back to her senses and said, "It's more than much earlier. In our ancient small world, we have to cultivate our divine sense systematically from the foundation establishment stage. Didn't Lung Lung mention it to you?" "I really didn't." Lin Yi shook his head. Lung Lung must have thought that he already knew about this, so she didn't mention it at all. However, now that he thought about it, it was no wonder that Master Lung Lung would give her that piece of star-ink charcoal. According to the usual understanding of the Heaven Stage Island, Lin Yi thought that this kind of thing would only do harm to an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. It turned out that he was completely wrong. Once someone reached the foundation establishment stage, they would have to start cultivating their divine sense systematically. As long as the method was mastered, they would not be devoured by the star-ink charcoal at all. This also showed that Lung Lung was indeed deeply in love with him. The star-ink charcoal was a precious treasure that she needed for her own cultivation. Others could not get it no matter how hard they fought for it. However, When she didn't know if Lin Yi could survive, she did not hesitate to give it to Lin Yi. It was enough to show the depth of her love. Duan Muyu was speechless for a moment. She returned to the topic at hand and said, "The divine sense grass should be the best spiritual medicine in terms of divine sense. Since you're a primordial spirit, it might be able to help you break through the barrier." "It's possible. It's very possible." Lin Yi began to get a little excited. This was different from the holy water droplet. The holy water droplet was specifically used for healing, while the divine sense grass itself was used to temper and enhance divine sense. The effects of the two were completely different. While listening to Duan Muyu's words just now, he suddenly realized that the reason why he was stuck in a bottleneck for a long time, without any progress, was most likely because he had gone in the wrong direction from the beginning. Out of habit, ever since Lin Yi was projected to the secular world, he had always relied on the experience he had on the Heaven Stage Island to recover and enhance his strength. Moreover, to a certain extent, his primordial spirit was no different from his main body. The various organ structures that should be, there were not a single thing wrong with him doing so. At least, the initial stage was still very smooth. However, a primordial spirit was a primordial spirit after all. There was a fundamental difference between it and the main body. Using the main body set of cultivation methods was still passable in the beginning, but it would not work at all after that. In fact, it was very likely that even the smooth sailing at the beginning was not because of cultivation. It was most likely because there was an adaptation and recovery process after the primordial spirit projection. After this process was over, it would be useless to use the normal method of cultivation. Thinking about it carefully, it was not difficult to understand why he could still improve all the way to the current foundation establishment great perfection. This was because Lin Yi had been using the piece of star ink charcoal that Lung Long gave him. He could continue to upgrade, not because of normal cultivation, but because he had been absorbing the majestic divine sense energy in the star ink charcoal. When the divine sense energy of the star ink charcoal was almost consumed, Lin Yi began to consciously control it. He just happened to encounter a bottleneck that he could not overcome no matter what. This was a strong evidence. Chapter 5288. But for the current Lin Yi, just adjusting his thoughts was useless because he only had a little bit of star ink charcoal's consciousness left, and there was no place to replenish it. It was like training with one's body, but there was no energy in the world. How was he supposed to train? Fortunately, he learned about the divine knowledge grass from Duan Muyu in time. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a timely help. Lin Yi looked at her and asked, "Do many people know about the divine knowledge grass?" "It's very rare, because the divine sense grass is a secret that has been passed down from my master. Even the ancient books related to this ancient trial ground don't have any records of it. Besides me, I'm afraid none of the other trial disciples know about it." Duan Muyu suddenly paused and said thoughtfully, "Now that you know about it, suddenly asking this, is it because you have some kind of crooked idea?" "What crooked idea?" Lin Yi froze for a moment, then reacted and laughed. "Do you think I'm that kind of person?" Duan Muyu smiled. Of course, she knew that Lin Yi was not such a person. Otherwise, she would not have taken the initiative to say it. "So, only you and I know about the existence of the divine knowledge grass. Why are you telling me such an important thing?" Lin Yi couldn't help but wonder. In the face of a rare heavenly material like the divine knowledge grass, it was normal for cultivators to fight to the death, and his relationship with Duan Muyu was far from inseparable. What was this woman thinking? No reason, just a whim. Duan Muyu's face showed a rare playfulness. Lin Yi suddenly blushed with shame. He didn't know that this woman had such a playful side in addition to being a tomboy. Women were really fickle creatures. To be precise, it should be considered as returning a plum for a peach. "I think you're a pretty good partner. You're trustworthy and trustworthy. At the very least, you won't have evil thoughts and kill me to seize my treasure." Duan Muyu explained with a serious expression. This was not just a whim, but a decision made after careful consideration. There were crouching tigers and hidden dragons in this ancient trial ground. There was the water lotus protector, the brain-eating insect envoy, and the ancient giant lizard. Each of them was an existence that was almost undefeatable. More importantly, there was a lore that was above them. Just thinking about it made one tremble in fear. Moreover, the divine knowledge grass was an extremely rare and precious heavenly treasure. Who knew what kind of terrifying spirit beast they would encounter? Even if he used his toes to think about the dangers involved, it would not be easy to collect the divine sense grass. So Duanmu, you had to find a reliable partner in any case. And Lin Yi was an excellent ready-made candidate. There aren't many people who can kill you. Why not find someone weaker than you to work with? This way, you won't have anything to worry about. Lin Yi smiled. This was the truth. Although Duanmu Yu was only at the Foundation establishment great perfection, her Yiling sect martial arts techniques were extremely mysterious. If she really wanted to escape, even Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing, who were at the Gold Core perfection, might not necessarily be able to kill her, let alone others. Then it's better not to find one. Duanmu Yu rolled her eyes at him. Even her own strength was enough to protect herself at most. If she really encountered a terrifying spirit beast, it would be difficult for her to even protect herself. If she found someone weaker than her, wouldn't that be asking for trouble? Hee, that's true. How about this? After we find the divine knowledge grass, we split it in half. Lin Yi suggested. No problem. Duanmu Yu had no objection to this. Although she was the one who provided the information about the divine knowledge grass, she did not know its specific location after all. She didn't even know if it really existed. Moreover, if they really encountered trouble, it would definitely be Lin Yi who would take the lead, so it was not a loss for her to take half. In that case, let's hurry up. Lin Yi immediately took the lead and walked forward, muttering faintly in his heart. Just now, Xue Jianfeng also hurried in this direction. Although it was not strange that everyone's destination was the river of divine knowledge, he always felt that things were not so simple. The two of them were not far from the location of the river of divine knowledge. In addition, Lin Yi could also pull out the water lotus doppelganger to show the way. Compared to others who could only follow the map, they could walk a lot less in vain. After only half a day, Lin Yi and Duanmu Yu arrived at the legendary river of divine knowledge. When they saw the scene in front of them, both of them were shocked and could not say a word for a long time. In their previous expectations, since the river of divine knowledge was located in the deep mountains and dense forests, it would not be very big. At most, it would be an ordinary forest river, but they did not expect that it was not the case at all. The river of divine sense that was reflected in his eyes could only be described with a few words: magnificent and majestic. The surface of the river was shrouded in a faint layer of fog, and the other side could not be seen at a glance. Even Lin Yi's divine knowledge could not detect it. Even if the inexplicable fog interfered with the divine knowledge, it at least proved that the river of divine knowledge was more than several kilometers wide. No one has been here before. Lin Yi carefully looked around the coast and found no traces left by human cultivators. It could be seen that even if someone came to the river of divine knowledge, they would definitely not be in this area, but in another section of the river. But Duanmu Yu paused and said doubtfully, "It is said that the river of divine knowledge can temper the divine knowledge, but I don't feel anything different about this river." In this primordial smelting trial, almost everyone had come for the river of knowledge. However, no one knew what mysteries the river of knowledge possessed or how to temper one's divine sense. Everything could only be figured out on the spot when they arrived. Maybe it's the effect of the river water? Lin Yi thought for a while and immediately dipped his hand in the river water. Not only did he carefully sniff it, but he also directly licked it with his tongue. This was a quite risky move. After all, no one knew what was wrong with the river of divine knowledge. What if the river water was poisonous? However, Lin Yi dared to try it rashly because he was a spirit body and had the holy water pearl in his hand. However, the result of the attempt made him speechless. This water was simply ordinary river water. There was nothing special about it. If he was an ordinary cultivator, it would not be surprising that he could not detect the mystery. But he was Lin Yi, and he was a spirit body that was most sensitive to divine knowledge energy. If this river water really had the effect of tempering the divine knowledge, how could he not feel it at all? Chapter 52:89. Lin glanced at her and immediately took out a wooden bowl from the jade pendant space, scooped a bowl full of river water, and handed it to her. "Warrior, drink this bowl of spiritual knowledge river water." Duan Muyu rolled her eyes, took the wooden bowl, and took a sip, smacking her lips while frowning. "Except for the slight bitterness, this is just ordinary river water. It can be seen that the key is definitely not in the river." "Lin," he concluded. "Then where is the key?" Duan Muyu asked. "In the river." Lin, he was very sure. If this river of spiritual knowledge was just an ordinary river, he would definitely not think so. But this river was not only extremely wide, but it was also shrouded in a layer of inexplicable fog. No matter how he looked at it, it was unusual. If there was nothing strange about it, Lin, he would feel strange instead. "Do you want to go down and have a look?" Duan Muyu asked. Although the river could not be seen at a glance, the nearby river water was still very clear, and even the bottom of the river could be seen at a glance. If they just explored near the shore, even if they encountered danger, they could escape in time. There should not be any big problems. It's best not to do this unless it's a last resort. Lin, he shook his head decisively. Although he couldn't say why, his intuition told him that this river was definitely not simple. If they rashly went down the river, they might encounter a terrible crisis. "But besides going down the river, what else can we do?" Duan Muyu said helplessly. "Let's not worry about the river of spiritual knowledge for now. Let's find the spiritual knowledge grass first." "Didn't you say it was near the river of spiritual knowledge?" Lin, he suggested. The matter of the river of spiritual knowledge could be put aside for now. It would not be too late to figure out what to do next. In contrast, the spiritual knowledge grass was more important. If they could find the spiritual knowledge grass, it did not matter much whether the river of spiritual knowledge could temper the spiritual knowledge. "Not nearby, but in the river," Duan Muyu said. "In the river?" Lin, he was surprised when he heard this and could not help frowning. Is the so-called effect of the river of spiritual knowledge referring to the spiritual knowledge grass? "That's possible." Duan Muyu nodded. The matter of the river of spiritual knowledge was only recorded in a very small number of ancient books, but there was no substantial conclusion that could be passed down. The so-called tempering of spiritual knowledge was only a very vague description. Maybe it was referring to the spiritual knowledge grass, but it was not clearly mentioned in the ancient books. "So we really have to go down there?" Lin, he couldn't help but have a headache. His intuition was rarely wrong. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he really didn't want to go into the river. "That's not necessarily the case. We can wait for the river to ebb. Then we can go down the river to find the spiritual knowledge grass, as long as we come up in time before the tide rises." Duan Muyu said. This was a method passed down by her master. Otherwise, it would not be so easy to find the divine sense grass growing in the river. "All right." Lin Yi's eyes lit up. Such a wide and boundless river would definitely have high and low tides. Even if it was still risky to wait until the tide was low, it was much less risky than entering the river rashly. This method was feasible. After the two agreed on the plan, they meditated and rested by the river, while conserving their energy and waiting for the tide to ebb. Not long after, the river slowly receded, and the bottom of the river near the shore was revealed to the two. Lin Yi and Duan Muyu got up at the same time, glanced at each other, and went down the river to look for the divine sense grass. However, although the tide was ebbing, the river was not completely drained. Only a small part of the riverbed was exposed. Lin Yi and Duan Muyu could only hurry up and search this part of the riverbed. When the tide rose, they would have to hurry back to the shore and wait for the next ebb. What the two did not expect was that the bottom of the river of spiritual knowledge was unexpectedly green, with all kinds of water plants everywhere. It was not easy to find the divine sense grass that they had never seen before. Even if Duan Muyu knew some of its general characteristics, it would not be easy. "Let's take our time. There is no limit to the number of times we can search. This time we will first search a section, and next time we will search another section. If there really is a divine sense grass, I believe we will find something. Lenny said, and then let's start from the deepest riverbed and wait for the tide to rise before we go to the shore. This way, we will have a little more time. Duan Muyu suggested. Okay. Lenny nodded. The two immediately began to search the riverbed closest to the center of the river. This place was 3 or 4 miles from the shore, but even so, with Lin Yi's divine sense, he could not detect how wide the river was at the moment, let alone the boundary of the other side. This river of spiritual knowledge was really a bit wide. People who did not know might think it was a sea. This mud is a bit deep. Lenny frowned when he walked halfway. At this time, the mud had already reached his thigh. According to this, when they reached the farthest end, the mud would at least reach his chest. If it was an ordinary person, it would be extremely difficult to even move a step, let alone find the divine sense grass in this environment. Even if they waited until the tide rose, they would not be able to retreat, and even their lives would be lost in the river. However, this was only for ordinary people. For a master of the foundation establishment stage, it was nothing. At most, there would be some hindrance in their movements. Lin, he was still a soul body. Although all the parts in his body were still there, his weight was much lighter than his body. As long as he controlled it a little, even if he stood on the mud, he would not sink. Of course, Lin, he actually had a more convenient method, which was to transform into a soul body. However, he always felt that this place gave him an inexplicable sense of crisis. If something happened to his soul body, he might not even have a chance to react, so he did not dare to do this rashly. On the other hand, Duan Muyu was also calm, walking on the mud as if she was walking on flat ground. She looked more elegant and neat than Lin Yi, and she was also silent. Seeing Lin Yi looking at her in surprise, she smiled and explained, Silent leaf fall is a specialized light body martial technique of our Yiling sect. Very good, Lin Yi sincerely praised. This was not a compliment. With his insight, he could see the value of silent leaf fall. Using it to deal with the mud was really overkill. This kind of silent light body martial technique could only show its greatest value in actual combat. As the eldest senior sister of Yiling's sect, Duan Muyu was indeed not simple. Duan Muyu smiled slightly, and then began to carefully search for the divine sense grass in the omnipresent pile of water plants. Lin Yi also did not neglect. This place was not suitable to stay for long, and they had to move quickly. The two of them were very efficient, but even so, they still found nothing. When the tide rose, they returned to the shore empty-handed and looked at each other. Chapter 5290. Well, it's getting dark now. Let's conserve our energy and wait for the tide to ebb tomorrow morning before going to the next riverbed to look for it. Lenny nodded. Although they had gained nothing today, at least there was no unexpected danger. It could be seen that the idea of going down the river to look for it when the tide ebbed should be right. It was nothing more than whether they could find the divine knowledge grass in the end. This matter not only depended on effort, but also depended on luck. All the two of them could do was do their best. For safety reasons, the two did not stay on the shore for the night. Instead, they found a nearby big tree and made a medium-sized tree hole with their bare hands, so that they could rest in the hole with peace of mind. Lin Yi also deliberately summoned the water lily doppelganger to inquire about the whereabouts of Cold and the others. After confirming that everyone was not in danger for the time being, and that they were all resting in a place not far from the river of divine knowledge, he was relieved. The night was quiet, and there was no one around. A man and a woman alone in a tree hole. Most women would feel uncomfortable, but Duan Muyu did not have such concerns at all. While resting, she was also carefully looking at Lin Yi. Why are you looking at me? Lin Yi could not help but stop in surprise. Are you practicing withered leaf rejuvenation? Duan Muyu asked with a strange expression. Her perception was far more sensitive than ordinary people, and the chi fluctuations on Lin Yi's body just now were too familiar to her. Although she only said a little bit of the essence and did not reveal any cultivation method, it was reasonable to say that there should be no way to practice it. But the problem was that the other party was Lin Yi. Since this guy could even imitate the unique skill of the evil cultivator, the soul hook hand, let alone withered leaf rejuvenation, can I? Lin, he looked at her and said, I don't care. Anyway, even if you really practice it, it's your own exploration. Duan Muyu shrugged. Although it was a little irresponsible to turn a blind eye, it was their business how they wanted to explore and research, and she really couldn't control it. Don't worry. Actually, I'm not really going to cultivate your leaf spirit sex spring rejuvenation. If I'm not wrong, your leaf spirit sex techniques complement each other. I'll have to cultivate them from the beginning. It's impossible for me to cultivate spring rejuvenation on my own, right? Lin, he speculated. You can even guess that? You're really a freak. Duanmu, you could not help saying in surprise. Just as Lin he had said, the essence of all of leaf spirit sex techniques was a progressive progression from shallow to deep. It was a very complete system. If one didn't grasp the essence of the basic techniques, no matter how talented they were, they wouldn't be able to cultivate an advanced technique like rejuvenation withered leaves. Of course, if one could even grasp the essence of rejuvenation withered leaves, then grasping the essence of the basic techniques would be a matter of course. They wouldn't need to cultivate it specifically. You flatter me. Lin, he chuckled. In fact, he was able to speculate this not just because he had extraordinary insight, but mainly because his real body's level was high enough and his horizons were broad enough. He had seen all kinds of mental cultivation methods and martial arts techniques, so his judgment was naturally accurate. If you're not going to cultivate spring rejuvenation withered leaves, then what are you doing? Duanmu, you could not help asking. I vaguely feel that the essence of spring rejuvenation withered leaves is very useful to me, but I don't know how to use it specifically. I need to explore and study it carefully, Lin, he said honestly. To put it bluntly, the essence of spring rejuvenation withered leaves was to forcibly awaken hidden vitality. To a certain extent, it was somewhat similar to the super physical skills and ultimate physical skills that he had previously mastered. However, there were also major differences. After all, the latter purely stimulated the physical body, allowing it to have a stronger reaction speed. It was impossible for it to be like spring rejuvenation withered leaves that could restore the vital qi in the body, let alone have the miraculous effect of self-healing. Comparing the two, it was obvious that spring rejuvenation withered leaves was much more exquisite. However, whether it was restoring vital qi or self-healing, these two miraculous effects of spring rejuvenation withered leaves were of little value to Lin Yi. This was because not only did he know them, but he also had no sequelae. If he used spring rejuvenation withered leaves, he would definitely be in a weak state for a long period of time. That would be really fucked up. Lin Yi would not do something so stupid as to give up what was close at hand and seek what was far away. Of course, although it was of little value, Lin Yi still tried to figure it out. He wanted to master the trick and draw inferences. He did not need vital qi or healing, but if similar effects could be transferred to the primordial spirit, then it would be worth it. Don't forget that he was now a primordial spirit body. Duan Muyu silently looked at Lin Yi's various explorations and deductions. The profound mystery revealed from time to time really opened her eyes. This kind of feeling could be said to be unprecedented. Even her master had never made her unable to see through it. One had to know that her master was not an ordinary master of the Gold Core stage, but a real Yuanying stage old monster, standing at the top of the entire ancient small underworld. It was a pity that the top of the ancient small underworld was just like that. It was completely incomparable to the Heaven Stage Island. How could a mere Yuanying stage old monster be compared with a freak like Lin Yi who could even kill the giants of the mountain opening period? The two of them sat silently like this for a long time. Suddenly, Duan Muyu opened her eyes. She felt that Lin Yi's aura had inexplicably soared a lot in a moment, but now that she looked at it, there was nothing strange about Lin Yi's body, and there was no difference from just now. She couldn't help muttering, "Is it my illusion?" Lin Yi did not pay attention to her. It seemed that he was still immersed in his own exploration and deduction, and was unaware of the outside world. Duan Muyu even believed that even if she stabbed him at this time, Lin Yi would not have the slightest reaction. Is this guy really insensitive, or is he too confident in me? Duan Muyu couldn't help but shake her head speechlessly. While continuing to meditate and rest, she carefully watched the movements outside. Since Lin Yi did not care about the outside world, this kind of thing could only be borne by her. What Duan Muyu didn't expect was that Lin Yi's sitting time was much longer than she expected. The tide hasn't ebbed yet? Lin Yi finally opened his eyes slowly, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but then he returned to normal. The tide hasn't ebbed yet? Big brother, it has already ebbed 5 times. Duan Muyu said angrily. What? Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. He clearly just groped and deduced in his mind. It didn't take much time. Chapter 5291. Moreover, she did not dare to go down the river alone to find the divine sense grass. The key was Lin Yi's current state. Duan Muyu did not feel at ease leaving him alone, so she could only stay and accompany him patiently. In this kind of situation, anyone would be angry. 3 days. Lin Yi suddenly blushed with shame and quickly apologized with a smile. I'm sorry. I accidentally fell into a trance. Forget it. There is no time limit for this matter anyway. I'll just take it as a rest. Duan Muyu waved her hand generously, and then said with a bit of envy in her tone, But you are really amazing. You can casually enter a state of emptiness in this kind of place. Your perception must be amazing. It's really enviable. After emptiness was an epiphany, and this state was a rare opportunity for every cultivator. Apart from a very small number of people, most people would only be able to enter a state of emptiness a few times in their lifetime. Even Duan Muyu had only experienced it once. It was during that moment of emptiness and epiphany that she was reborn, and she became the eldest senior sister who was the pillar of the entire Yiling sect in one go. In a place where danger lurked everywhere, Lin Yi was able to enter a state of emptiness so effortlessly. What was there to say about that? It's just a coincidence, Lin Yi said modestly, but his whole temperament was obviously much more brilliant than before. It could be seen that he must have gained something, and the harvest should not be small. Don't. If even a freak like you is so modest, how can we mortals live? Duan Muyu curled her lips and looked at the sky outside. According to the experience of the past 2 days, the tide should begin to ebb soon. Okay, then let's hurry up. Lin Yi nodded. Because of that sudden enlightenment, they had already missed 3 days of time. Neither of them wanted to waste any more time and immediately rushed towards the river of consciousness. Duan Muyu had already scouted the place 2 days ago and had planned out the riverbed they would explore every day. Lin Yi only needed to follow her. After their first experience, the two of them were much more familiar with the path this time around. They had more or less learned about how to identify the aquatic plants, so their efficiency was clearly much higher. Last time, when the tide rose, the two of them had only explored less than 5 kilometers of the riverbed. Now, there was still more than half the time before the tide rose, but the two of them had already explored 5 kilometers. Their progress was much faster than they had expected. When they found about 15 miles, Lin Yi suddenly stopped. In the dense pile of aquatic plants not far ahead, there was a plant that was completely different from the other aquatic plants. The whole body was dark black and had no leaves. It was just a slender and narrow branch. That way, he would not have ended up in this situation. At this time, the divine knowledge grass was being stepped on by the brain-eating insect. There was no chance to take it back. I will find a way to stall it. You go first. Lin Yi said immediately. Now is not the time to worry about the divine knowledge grass. If he missed the divine knowledge grass, he could find it again, but if he lost his life here, then there would be nothing left. But Duan Muyu hesitated for a moment. Although she was a tough woman, she was not as open-minded as Lin Yi. She felt unwilling to leave like this, but in the face of the power of the brain-eating insect, she had no choice but to grit her teeth and nod. Duan Muyu immediately retreated to the river bank, But before she could take 2 steps, a dozen tangible and invisible wind blades had already roared towards her. This was the innate skill of the ancient Gomong clan. Duan Muyu was shocked. The power of any wind blade here could easily kill a golden core stage master, let alone a mere foundation establishment stage cultivator like her. Even Lin Yi did not dare to take such a strong attack head-on. If she wanted to save her life, she could only rely on herself. At the critical moment, Duan Muyu's figure suddenly vanished into thin air, leaving only a leaf that slowly fell down. The fall of a leaf signified the arrival of autumn. Lin Yi breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Duan Muyu was also a genius. Otherwise, he could only watch the other party die, and he would really feel guilty. Chapter 5292. At this time, it was completely in combat mode. Its entire body had transformed into an extremely hideous shape. It had the wings of the primordial Gomong, the body of the red-scaled serpent, the steel claws of the 8-armed mountain king, the stinger of the venomous queen bee, and a terrifying head that was armed to the teeth with unknown characteristics of many powerful spirit beasts. It was an out-and-out killing machine. Lin Yi frowned as he looked at this guy. Although the brain-eating bug and the water lotus protector were at the same level, if he could choose, Lin Yi would definitely choose the water lotus protector. Even if he could not directly store it in the space of a jade pendant, Lin Yi would rather choose the water lotus protector. This was because the water lotus protector was skilled, and even if it was a nearly unsolvable and complicated technique like the moon's reflection, with Lin Yi's vision and insight, he would always be able to find flaws and find a way to deal with it. However, the brain-eating bug was different. This guy was clearly an existence that relied on its body to survive. It was not an exaggeration to say that its body was the strongest at the same level. If it was only at the level of foundation establishment great perfection, Lin Yi's methods would be enough to crush it head-on. However, the problem was that it was at least at the level of golden core great perfection. Facing Lin Yi, it had an absolute level of suppression. In this case, it had the most tenacious vitality and the strongest defense. It was simply invulnerable. Last time, Lin Yi used 2 vital energy bombs to deal with it, but in the end, he did not even hurt a single hair on it. This had already explained everything. With Lin Yi's current attack power, he could not even break through the brain-eating bug's defense. How could he fight it? Seeing Lin Yi's uncertain expression, the brain-eating bug suddenly laughed. Although it was a little interested in Duan Muyu, who used falling leaves to predict autumn, it obviously valued Lin Yi more. Its focus had always been on Lin Yi. This time, don't even think of escaping from my palm. I will never make the same mistake twice. Is that so? Are you sure you can catch up to me? Lin Yi revealed a playful look when he heard this. Facing the brain-eating insect, he had no confidence in other aspects, but he had absolute confidence in speed. After all, it was faster than his own body. Even if the brain-eating insect was strong, it couldn't be compared to a profound, ascending stage master, right? There's no need for that. As long as I catch that woman just now, you won't escape. The brain-eating worm had learned its lesson this time, so it was obviously much more cunning. If it had held cold and the others as hostages previously, Lin Yi would not have dared to escape at all. It was only because of its carelessness that Lin Yi managed to take advantage of the situation. Hee, it's clearly just an insect. I didn't expect it to be so good at judging people. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. Hee, we don't look at people with our eyes, but with our noses. Every one of you has a different smell. Different people have different smells. Human nature can be faked, but the smell in your bones cannot be faked. The brain-eating bug proudly showed off. Is that so? That's a good lesson. Lin Yi nodded and learned. This time, he was really caught by the brain-eating bug. If he didn't have much contact with Duan Muyu before this, it wouldn't matter much. He could just turn a blind eye to it. But now he couldn't ignore it. If Duan Muyu couldn't leave, he would definitely stay and fight to the end. You're welcome. Otherwise, you should be more tactful. Don't worry. It's rare to meet such a unique human master like you. I won't let you disappear for no reason. I will take you as my main body. From now on, you are me, and I am you. We are one. The brain-eating bug said excitedly. You and I are one. Lin Yi listened with a strange face. If it really reached that step, it was uncertain who would swallow who. Even if the brain-eating bug had a powerful brain-eating talent, his Yuan Shun was not just a decoration. It was hard to say. How about it? If you take the initiative to cooperate, I can save you a lot of unnecessary pain. The brain-eating bug was still persuading impatiently. It was not that it was bored and wasting its breath, but it was afraid that it would accidentally damage Lin Yi's brain when they fought. This kind of thing often happened. Once the brain was damaged, it couldn't eat the brain anymore. You can't really think that my brain is damaged, right? Lin Yi looked at it like it was an idiot. It wanted him to surrender and let it swallow his brain. Only it could think of such a thing. Not satisfied? Then I will take a step back and leave a little bit of your consciousness for you to share a main body with me. That should be fine, right? The brain-eating bug continued to bargain. It could be seen that it was determined to get Lin Yi's body. If it wasn't afraid of damaging Lin Yi, it would have already slapped him with its claws. It wouldn't be so long-winded. Let me ask you a question. Since your current body is so powerful, at least 1,000 times stronger than mine, why do you still insist on using me as your main body? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask curiously. In his opinion, the brain-eating bug was much more domineering than a human. Its entire body was full of killing weapons, and it would definitely have an advantage in a fight. If possible, he didn't even mind exchanging with the brain-eating bug. Of course, the main body had to be a human. He couldn't accept it if the main body turned into an insect. Hee, there's no harm in telling you. You humans may have weak bodies, but you are the spirit of all living things. No matter how powerful other species are, they are still limited by their racial talent. There is only one possibility. You humans may have a low starting point, but you have countless possibilities. If coupled with my brain-eating talent, you will be an invincible existence. Moreover, a high-level spirit beast will always need a human body to be on the stage. Otherwise, it will be laughed at by other spirit beasts, the brain-eating bug explained patiently. So that's how it is. Lin Yi suddenly understood. No wonder this guy wanted to catch him no matter what. It seemed like this guy's brain-eating talent was heaven-defying, but it also had a limit. There might be an upper limit to the species it could devour. Most spirit beasts only had one racial talent, and it was rare for them to have more than two. In this case, every time it devoured, it would only gain one more skill. However, humans were different. There were tens of thousands of cultivation methods and martial arts techniques. With the brain-eating bug's ability, it could even take all the cultivation methods and martial arts techniques as its own. Moreover, it didn't need to cultivate them from the beginning. Just the thought of it made people shudder. Chapter 5293. Okay, the nonsense that should be said and should not be said has been said. You can also obediently accept your fate. The brain-eating insect suddenly laughed extremely sinisterly. Its eyes flashed red, and an invisible force field suddenly spread out from its body. Wherever it passed, the riverbed silt suddenly sank a lot, as if it was being crushed by something heavy. Lin Yi also felt his body sink, although it was not to the point where he could not bear it. With this inexplicable force field on his body, the speed and flexibility of his movement technique would be greatly affected. However, the brain-eating insect's target this time was obviously not Lin Yi, but Duan Muyu, who had just used knowledge of autumn to hide. Sure enough, Duan Muyu, who did not reveal any flaws before, suddenly exposed herself. Although she did not directly reveal herself, two suddenly sinking footprints appeared in the silt, just next to the divine knowledge grass. There was no doubt that it was Duan Muyu. Lin Yi could not help but be a little speechless. This woman was really brave. She knew the horror of the brain-eating insect, but she did not escape. She even dared to use knowledge of autumn to steal the divine knowledge grass. This courage was really unparalleled. Duan Muyu was about to take a knife to cut the divine knowledge grass at this time. After being caught off guard and revealing a flaw, she did not panic and still maintained the state of knowledge of autumn's concealment. The brain-eating insect suddenly opened its mouth in the direction of the footprints, and an unparalleled strong suction force suddenly poured out. The result was unexpected. In addition to sucking in a mouthful of silt, there was no trace of Duanmu Yu at all. It's really interesting. The brain-eating insect laughed instead of being angry. If it were not for Lin Yi, a better choice, it even wanted to use Duanmu Yu as its main body at this moment. In the face of its sudden force field, Duanmu Yu did not panic and could calmly escape without even leaving a footprint. It must be known that this was a muddy land where one's feet would sink into the mud. The difficulty of this was extraordinary. Unfortunately, Duanmu Yu did not manage to escape its grasp. The brain-eating bug's eyes flashed with red light again, and the invisible force field suddenly became several times stronger. Second layer pressure. Duanmu Yu could no longer maintain her stealth state and immediately revealed herself. Before she could react further, the brain-eating insect had already landed right on top of her head. The venomous stinger pierced down at lightning speed. Duanmu Yu had no time to react at all. At the critical moment, Lin Yi appeared in front of Duanmu Yu at the same time and pushed him away. However, he could not dodge in time, and his neck was pierced by the brain-eating insect's stinger from behind. It was a shocking scene. Lin Yi. Duanmu Yu's eyes immediately turned red with anxiety. Although her relationship with Lin Yi was far from being on the same side, they were at least trustworthy friends. Moreover, she was a person who valued friendship. Now that she saw Lin Yi dying for her, how could she not be anxious? I didn't expect him to be an infatuated person. But this is also good. It saved me a lot of trouble. The brain-eating bug was overjoyed when it saw this. It was most afraid that Lin Yi would escape again. If that happened, it did not know how much effort it would have to put in. It did not have such good patience. Just now, it pretended to deal with Duanmu Yu to restrain Lin Yi. It did not expect Lin Yi to walk into its trap. This was really a pleasant surprise. Its stinger inherited the innate skill of the venomous queen bee. It was one of the world's few poisons, especially when it pierced through a vital point like the neck. Not to mention a mere human. Even with its vitality, it would not be able to survive such a fierce attack. As a result, Lin Yi's head, which was clearly hanging down, showed a strange smile. His figure flashed and suddenly jumped on the brain-eating bug's face. He then stuffed one hand into the other's mouth, leaving behind a true chi pill firebomb that was compressed to the limit. Boom! The brain-eating bug's face was still full of shock. It had not even figured out how the other party broke free from its poisonous stinger, and the true chi pill firebomb had already exploded in its mouth. Don't look at how the two true chi pill firebombs last time could not hurt its hair. It only could not break the surface defense of its body. No matter how strong it was, its body should not be indestructible, right? The brain-eating bug was blown up on the spot. It immediately spat out black smoke and flew backward. It swayed for a long time and could not stand firm. Although it was unrealistic to kill it in a second, it must have been seriously injured. Are you okay? Duanmu Yu looked at the intact Lin Yi and was stunned. His neck had obviously been pierced by the other party's stinger. So how could this guy be fine? I'm a primordial spirit. What is the use of this kind of physical attack on me? Lin Yi grinned. At that moment, his neck had already been transformed into primordial spirit in advance. The other party's stinger did not even stab a single hair on him. He was just pretending to numb the other party. That's true. Duanmu Yu could not help but choke. Because Lin Yi's primordial spirit was no different from ordinary people. Even if they knew that he was a primordial spirit, everyone would unconsciously ignore this point. The brain-eating bug, who did not know the details, was even more likely to fall for it. While the two of them were talking, the brain-eating bug on the opposite side had already recovered. Its entire mouth was charred black from the explosion, making it look rather comical and pathetic, but the pressure it brought to the two of them did not weaken at all. Instead, it became even stronger. Lin Yi sighed in his heart. The brain-eating bug is a brain-eating bug. Last time, the red-scaled snake was killed on the spot by this attack, but now it is just a little embarrassed. It seems that it is far from the point of injury. It is really troublesome. Ooh. The brain-eating bug did not become angry. Instead, it calmly spat out 3 mouthfuls of black smoke. Then it stared at Lin E and said, "You can even ignore such a fatal attack. I really did not misjudge you. Who else can my main body but you? So, you really want to blackmail me?" Lin E did not know whether to laugh or cry. He thought that after such a trick, the other party would become angry and give him an opportunity to take advantage of. Who would have thought that it would be such a reaction? Of course, the brain-eating bug laughed, and with a flap of its wings, it descended from the sky again. Its target was Lin E. "Be careful and hide." Lin E took the time to tell Duanmuyu and immediately went to meet it head-on. Duanmuyu did not dare to neglect and quickly used silent falling leaves to hide to the side. At the same time, she was still holding a green leaf in her hand, ready to use falling leaves in autumn again at any time. She could not intervene in a battle of this level. It would be good enough if she could save her life and not drag Lenny down. Chapter 5294. Relying on its powerful body, the brain-eating insect was not afraid of any of Lin Yi's means. It did not hesitate to attack with its steel claw. Last time, it relied on this steel claw to explode the real Chi Pill firebomb, and this time was no exception. However, Lenny obviously would not be stupid enough to really confront it head-on. With the strength of the opponent's body, not to mention his Yuan Shen body that was only at the Foundation Establishment great perfection, even if he was at the Profound Ascension stage, he might not be able to gain the slightest advantage. If he really did so, he would only be courting death. Accompanied by a deep dragon roar, a wave of 5 elements killing intent that seemed to have materialized shot out of his hand, meeting the other party's steel claws first. The result was unsurprising. In an instant, the other party grabbed it, leaving not even dregs behind. It was a classic case of striking a rock with an egg. Is that all you have?" The brain-eating insect sneered. In its opinion, this method was much weaker than the real Chi Pill firebomb just now. Although the real Chi Pill firebomb was simple and crude, its power could not be underestimated. If it was stuffed into its mouth, it could still cause some damage. As for this seemingly exquisite 5 elements murderous aura, it was nothing in front of it. Before it finished speaking, another 5 elements murderous aura had already attacked in front of it. The brain-eating insect suddenly became even more contemptuous. Once again, it lazily extended its steel claw, and at the same time taunted, "This power is not even enough to tickle me. Even if you do it 1,000 times or 10,000 times, it will still be the same, a waste of energy." However, this time, above the 5 elements murderous aura, there was an additional layer of dense 8 trigrams patterns. Compared to the previous 5 elements murderous aura, it was many times more mysterious and profound. It was like a real 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon. Puff! Not only did the brain-eating insect's steel claw fail to tear it apart, but it was bitten by it. The entire steel claw was broken in an instant, and in an instant blood splashed all over the sky. The brain-eating bug immediately howled in pain. Even though it had been careless, its combat instincts were not just for show. Before its brain could react, its venomous stinger had already stabbed back. However, before it could stab, the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon had already let out another dragon roar and whipped it away with its tail. It crashed heavily into the mud below, unable to extricate itself. This scene happened too quickly. Not to mention the brain-eating bug that was stunned. Even Duanmuyu was dumbfounded by what he saw. It was clearly the same 5 elements murderous aura, but it couldn't even withstand a single blow just now. How did it become so powerful all of a sudden? What was even more shocking was where did Linny go? Duanmuyu was confused, but the brain-eating bug was not stupid. It was caught off guard and suffered a big loss. Its brain worked very fast, and it looked at the 5 elements 8 trigrams flood dragon in the sky with great shock. "You're Linny. The 5 elements 8 trigrams flood dragon did not speak, but it revealed an extremely human-like expression. Clearly, the brain-eating bug had guessed correctly. It was Lin Yi. How is this possible? Duan Muyu completely did not know what to say. She knew that Lin Yi was a primordial spirit, but primordial spirits were primordial spirits. As far as she knew, primordial spirits could only transform into the appearance of their original body. It was impossible to transform into other forms. She could not say that Lin Yi's original body was actually a flood dragon, right? Of course, Lin Yi was not a flood dragon. The reason why he could become what he was now was because of her, Duan Muyu. Originally, with Lin Yi's current low realm of foundation establishment great perfection, it was far from enough to perform a big killing move like the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura. Until this time, when he had an epiphany, although his realm was still the same, his strength was very different because he had comprehended spring rejuvenation. Of course, what he comprehended was not the original version of spring rejuvenation. It was neither to restore vital energy nor heal oneself, but it was related to the primordial spirit. The human body had a self-protection mechanism, and the primordial spirit was the same. In theory, when it suffered a heavy enough injury, the primordial spirit would not directly collapse, but it would enter a self-dormant state like the body. That was to say, 70% of one's strength could be used at most, and the remaining 30% was used as a last resort for self-protection. There is a very strong valve between the two, and normally, even if one wanted to use it, one could not. Yi Ling's sex spring rejuvenation could open the valve of the physical body after the physical body was injured, and then restore to the peak state in a short period of time. However, this state was similar to the final radiance of the setting sun, so there were great sequelae. Now, after 3 days of epiphany, Lin Yi had successfully found the valve that locked the primordial spirit. Once the valve was opened, the strength of the primordial spirit could directly skyrocket by more than 30%, or even more. Lin Yi's strength had already reached the limit of foundation establishment great perfection, and after it skyrocketed by 30%, he immediately became a gold core stage master. Even if it was only temporary, the extra strength was not fake. Of course, with such a huge gap in strength between him and the brain-eating insect, not to mention a temporary gold core, even a real gold core would be useless. At most, the power of the vital energy pill firebomb would be stronger, but it would still have limited effect on the brain-eating insect. Needless to say, the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was not included. In terms of level, the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was far above the gold core stage. After all, this was a move that was invincible even in the nascent soul stage. It was just that Lin Yi's realm was too low, and at the same time, he encountered a freak like the brain-eating insect, so he seemed so powerless. However, the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was different. Its level was much higher than the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura. Against the brain-eating insect, the level of the move was far more crushing than the actual strength of the brain-eating insect against Lin Yi. To put it bluntly, once the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was released, it was enough to completely reverse the difference in strength between the two. However, even if Lin Yi's strength had reached the temporary gold core stage, it was not enough to perform a profound martial skill like the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura. Therefore, he thought of a way. Relying on the convenience of his primordial spirit, he integrated his entire primordial spirit into it. In this way, not only did he successfully form the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura, but he also created a living 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon. You can actually transform into a dragon? Is this your real body? The brain-eating insect was completely shocked. Looking at the 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon circling back and forth in the sky, it was full of fear. Looking at the entire spirit beast world, the dragon race had always been synonymous with being powerful and invincible. Even the flood dragon was the same. Although the brain-eating insect was gifted it could not help but feel fear in the face of the dragon race. This was an instinct, a fear that came from the depths of its soul, and it could not be suppressed no matter how hard it tried. Why don't you guess? The 5 elements, 8 trigrams dragon suddenly spoke, and it was Lin Yi's voice. Chapter 5295. Hee, this is a good name. Okay, this would be my flood dragon form. Lin Yi readily accepted the advice and no longer talked nonsense with this guy. He immediately flew down toward the brain-eating insect. It should be known that there was a time limit for him to maintain the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon form. He did not have to worry about the consumption of true qi, but the consumption of divine sense could not be made up. Therefore, he estimated that the time limit of a stick of incense was the limit. If he could not kill the brain-eating insect within this time, the consequences would be unimaginable. In fact, with Lin Yi's extremely pragmatic style, if it were not for the first time being in the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon form, and he was not too proficient in controlling it, he would not even give the opponent the time to talk nonsense. He would definitely beat it to death without saying a word. He would kill, injure, and cripple it. The rest could be dealt with later. You want to play close combat with me? I am the ancestor of close combat. Do you really think I will be afraid of you? The brain-eating insect was so angry that it laughed. It was caught off guard and suffered a big loss. But if it was close combat, there was no better spirit beast in the world. It was now the ultimate killing weapon of various spirit beasts. Even if Lin Yi transformed into a flood dragon, what could he do? Before the voice died away, the snake body of the brain-eating insect surged. It originally only had 2 steel claws, and one was bitten off by Lin Yi. As a result, it forcibly grew 6 steel claws. At first glance, it almost looked like a centipede. Lin Yi ignored it. At this moment, he was in the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flood dragon. Even his own temperament seemed to be affected, and he seemed to be a lot more indifferent than usual. Previously, when he looked at the brain-eating insect, he felt that this guy was shocking and very difficult to deal with, but now that he had transformed into the flood dragon form, he clearly looked down on the brain-eating insect. It was a kind of indescribable contempt. It was like a high-level spirit beast facing a low-level spirit beast. No matter how the other party called out, it would not really take it to heart. The reason was that it was not qualified. Go to hell. The brain-eating bug was instantly infuriated. This kind of gaze that looked at its prey had always been exclusive to it. When had it ever been looked at like this by others? The brain-eating bug frantically waved its steel claws and pounced forward. At least on the surface, its powerful body did indeed give it the upper hand. But unfortunately, reality was extremely cruel. Whether it was its steel claws, tail stinger, or wings, it did not give it the slightest advantage. Instead, in less than a second, it was smashed down by Lin Yi with a sweep of its tail. Once again, it sank deep into the mud, unable to extricate itself. The brain-eating bug refused to give up. It was at a disadvantage before because it was caught off guard, and now it was at a disadvantage because it did not figure out the opponent's strategy. Again, as a result, this time, it suffered even more serious injuries. Not only did it break another steel claw, but even its highly dangerous poisonous stinger was broken. The poison on it had no effect on Lin Yi at all. It was purely a decoration. Crushing. It was a complete one-sided suppression. Duan Muyu was completely speechless as he looked at this crazy scene. The brain-eating bug refused to give up again and again, but in the end, it was tortured by the 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon that Lin Yi had transformed into. In the end, 3.5 of its 8 steel claws were broken, and only the last one was on the verge of collapse. Its poisonous stinger was gone, and one of the wings on its back was broken. Its whole body was covered with scars and bruises. It was a miserable sight. Duan Muyu even began to pity the brain-eating bug. It was clearly a tyrannical and invincible existence. But in the end, it encountered Lin Yi, a heaven-defying existence that could not be measured by common sense. The torturer became the torturer. Did this guy not look at the almanac when he went out? The brain-eating bug indeed did not look at the almanac. In this ancient trial ground, it was originally an existence that was above tens of thousands of people. This kind of feeling of not looking at the almanac when going out would only appear on others but never on it. Today was really an accident. It was a tragic sight, but the brain-eating bug still refused to give up and struggled to fly up. Its vitality was extremely tenacious. It can fly with one wing? What a talent! Lenny could not help but give a thumbs up, but he did not show the slightest mercy. With a gulp, he obliterated its only remaining steel claw along with its wing. The brain-eating bug once again fell into the quagmire. Previously, it was majestic and domineering, but this time it had completely turned into a mudfish. A fallen phoenix was inferior to a chicken. Impossible, impossible, impossible. The brain-eating bug was still struggling frantically in the mud, but both of its wings had been broken, and it could no longer fly. Close combat was the ability it was most proud of. Looking at the entire ancient trial ground, it could be called an invincible existence. After all, even the Lord did not use this method, but it did not expect to fall in the hands of Lenny today. Moreover, it was killed in the way that it was best at, in such a brutal melee. Is there need to be so disappointed after losing to a dragon? Just how confident are you? Lenny could not help but be amused. That being said, the 5 elements and 8 trigrams dragon actually had such a powerful melee ability. This was something that even he did not expect. He could not help but sigh. The dragon clan was indeed an invincible existence in the spirit beast world. This racial talent was simply ruthless. Of course, being able to form such a one-sided crushing was not entirely because of the strength of the dragon. Another important reason was that this was not a pure physical body, but a semi-divine body that was formed by the fusion of primordial spirit and spiritual energy. Every claw and every bite seemed to be a simple physical attack, but the main body was the extremely profound, killing intent of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams. In the face of the brain-eating bug's pure melee, it was naturally advantageous, so it was not surprising that it was crushed. My body is invincible. Even the Dragon Clan cannot be my opponent. Absolutely impossible. The brain-eating bug was still hypnotizing itself. Except for a few spirit beasts with a long lineage, the Dragon Clan was a mountain in the heart of every spirit beast. Most of them were only willing to bow down to them, but the brain-eating bug did not think so. Even if it could not surpass the Dragon Clan, it should at least be one of the very few. At least it thought so. However, today, Lin used the bloody facts to shatter its fantasy. Even an illusionary dragon could crush it like this, let alone a real Dragon Clan. After all, the dragon was only a close relative of the Dragon Clan and the snake race. It was far from being a real dragon. Chapter 5296. The tide is rising. At this moment, Duan Muyu suddenly shouted from below. It was a pleasant surprise that Lin Yi could crush the brain-eating bug so easily, but she didn't forget about the important matter at hand. The tide had begun to rise, and they hadn't even had time to pick the spiritual grass yet. However, when she shouted, the first to react was not Lin Yi, but the brain-eating insect. Although it had been tortured into a miserable loach and seemed to be on the verge of collapse, the brain-eating insect still could not change its fierce and cunning nature. After hearing Duan Muyu's voice, it quickly drilled out of the mud. It really could not do anything to Lin Yi, who had transformed into a dragon, but it could easily capture Duan Muyu. As long as there was a hostage in its hands, it would not be defeated, and it still had the capital to bargain. Duan Muyu was shocked and quickly used the falling leaves of autumn to hide. However, before she had time to escape, the inexplicable aura that appeared before suddenly descended again, and the pressure was much stronger and more violent than before. Trio. Duan Muyu instantly revealed herself, and at this moment, the brain-eating insect was only one step away from her. Seeing that her body was about to be caught by the other party, it was too late for her to escape. At this moment, a dragon claw with the 8 trigrams pattern fell from the sky. Puff! The brain-eating insect was grabbed by the claw and then slammed into the mud. No matter how hard it struggled, it could not break free. Are you okay? Lin Yi glanced at Duanmuyu. To be precise, the 5 elements 8 trigrams dragon glanced at Duanmuyu. No, I'm fine. Although she knew that the other party was Lin Yi, being stared at by a dragon at such a close distance, Duanmuyu subconsciously felt a little flustered. At the same time, she also felt a little excited. This experience was unprecedented. After all, it was a dragon, a legendary existence. It's good that you're okay. Before Lin Yi's voice fell, although the brain-eating insect's head was grabbed by him, the snake's body madly wrapped around him, and it was hysterical and powerful. After being whipped twice by it, even Lin Yi, who had transformed into a dragon, could not bear it. The 8 trigrams pattern on his body suddenly dimmed a lot and began to show signs of deviation and dissipation. Not good. Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the time limit was up, and he couldn't maintain his dragon form any longer. He quickly gathered all his remaining chi into the dragon claw, and with a sudden burst, the hard skull of the brain-eating worm exploded like a watermelon, turning into a pile of thick, dirty water in the mud, and the stench of it assaulted his nose. At the same time, the flood dragon form of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams flashed and disappeared. Lin Yi quickly returned to the appearance of a primordial spirit. His face was pale, and he was clearly a little weak. How are you? Duanmuyu quickly held him up. Although she did not know the specific situation, she could roughly guess that it was most likely related to the essence of rejuvenating dead leaves that she had revealed to Lin Yi before. The reason why Lin Yi suddenly transformed into a flood dragon was probably because of this essence. Even if it was not the same thing as rejuvenating dead trees, similar methods always had similar side effects. After using it, it was inevitable that he would be weak for a period of time. I'm fine. With the holy water bead, it won't be a big deal. Lin Yi forced a smile. The side effect of rejuvenating dead leaves was a very long period of weakness. It could be as short as 3 months or as long as a year and a half. Duanmuyu was able to recover so quickly. In addition to her own high talent, it was mainly because she did not use the complete version of rejuvenating dead leaves. What Lin Yi was using now was the mutated version of rejuvenating dead leaves. The side effects were not so troublesome, but still should not be underestimated. After all, the consumption was too great. Strictly speaking, because it was almost a one-sided crushing of the brain-eating worm just now, Lin Yi was not really injured. It was just pure consumption. However, the problem was that this consumption was not ordinary consumption, but the consumption after opening the last self-protection valve of the primordial spirit. This was serious. When Lin Yi's primordial spirit was overdrawn to this extent, it was not much better than being injured. Fortunately, the holy water bead could come in handy. Although this thing could not replenish his divine sense energy, it could at least stabilize his primordial spirit. Otherwise, at this moment, Lin Yi would not be able to retain his consciousness at all, and would have long laid down and entered a state of self-hibernation. While relying on the holy water bead to stabilize his primordial spirit, he absorbed the last remaining divine sense energy of the star ink charcoal. Lin Yi knew that he had to restore his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, a disaster would befall him if any accidents happened. Duanmuyu saw this and did not say anything else. She turned around and said to Lin Yi, "Get up. You're carrying me?" Lin Yi grinned and added subconsciously, "I'm a man." "Nonsense. I know you're a man. It's urgent. So what's wrong with carrying you? You've carried me before, so we're even," Duanmuyu urged. She did not take the barrier between men and women as seriously as ordinary girls. Otherwise, when she was carried by Lin Yi in her underwear, she would have been too ashamed to face anyone. How could she act with Lin Yi so openly now? Okay, since even Duanmuyu did not mind, Lin Yi naturally did not care. Moreover, the tide had already risen, and he did not have the energy to move by himself for a while. This was the only choice he had. Lin Yi immediately climbed onto Duanmu Yu's back. Although she was a tough woman, he could still smell a refreshing fragrance from her neck. Perhaps it was because she had been in contact with Yi all year round in Yiling's sect, but this fragrance was very different from that of ordinary women. Rather than saying it was a body fragrance, it was better to say that it was a kind of agarwood fragrance, which actually made him feel refreshed and refreshed. Behave yourself. Don't breathe into my neck. Duanmu Yu frowned and spat. I didn't do it on purpose. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. He had overexerted himself, so it was natural for him to pant. How could he deliberately hold his breath at this time? Then don't breathe into my neck. Also, why are you so light? Duanmu Yu muttered. She thought that a big man like Lin Yi would at least weigh more than 140 kilograms. She did not expect him to be so light on her back. If Lin Yi had not wrapped his arms around her neck, she was afraid that a gust of wind would blow Lin Yi away. I'm a spirit body, so of course I'm much lighter than you. Lin Yi smiled bitterly again. Normally, he would not be so light, but now he had consumed too much energy. It was already very difficult for him to maintain the appearance of his spirit body. How could he care about whether it was solid or not? Chapter 5297. However, before she leaned over to cut it, Lin Yi on her back suddenly said, "Be careful." What? Duanmu Yu was shocked, and then she saw a huge loach sweeping out from the mud pile. It was the brain-eating bug whose head was just crushed by Lin Yi. This guy was still alive. A centipede dies, but does not fall down, not to mention the brain-eating bug's heaven-defying vitality. Lin Yi even suspected that it had swallowed the brain of some earthworm-type spirit beast. Even if the head was gone, the remaining body could still survive and become a new, independent individual. I underestimated the enemy. Lin Yi could not help but sigh. If he had dealt with the body just now, there would not be so many problems. Unfortunately, the 5 elements and 8 trigrams dragon form had reached its limit. If he had forcibly maintained it, he might have killed himself. He could only cancel it in advance, but he did not expect it to still leave a hidden danger. Unfortunately, it was too late to react now. Lin Yi's current state could not be said to be completely weak, but for a short period of time, he really did not have any strength to speak of. The only way to save his life was to transform into a spirit and leave it to fate. However, that was the last resort. Although the spirit form would not be harmed most of the time, once it encountered a method similar to alchemic fire that restrained the spirit, it would immediately be doomed. Lin Yi would not dare to do this, even if he was in his peak state, let alone now that he was so weak that he could not withstand a single blow. Maybe he would not even need to be specifically targeted. A strong wind would directly destroy his spirit. After all, the brain-eating bug was a brain-eating bug. Although it had been abused beyond recognition, this near-death sneak attack was still very powerful. Even if it was not even half of its peak state, it was enough to deal with the average Gold Core stage master. At this moment, Lin even vaguely heard the excited cry of the brain-eating bug. As long as its sneak attack was successful, it could counterattack and then activate its brain-eating talent. Unfortunately, it forgot one thing. Although Duanmu Yu was just an inconspicuous foundation establishment stage master, this woman's means were not as weak as her strength level. Boom! An iron leaf blocked the brain-eating insect's sneak attack at the last moment. The strength of the iron leaf was so strong that it actually forced the insect back. One leaf like a mountain. However, the opponent's attack was too strong, and Duanmu Yu was also sent flying. Even so, she did not forget to take care of Lin Yi behind her. She forcibly flipped her body over before she fell into the pile of mud. Lin Yi was on top of her, and she was on the bottom. She fell face first into the mud, and her face was covered in mud. Why bother? Lin Yi was slightly touched. In fact, there was no need for Duanmu Yu to do this. He could jump away before he landed, but that would more or less damage his essence soul. Pooh! Duanmu Yu spat out a mouthful of mud, which was poured into her nose. She spat it out without caring about her image and said casually, "It's okay. It's just a mouthful of mud." It's not a big deal. You really are a tough woman. Lin, he said sincerely. Manly woman? What do you mean? Duan Muyu frowned. Miss is really a strong woman. Lin, he changed the way he put it. Duan Muyu laughed when she heard this and did not take it to heart. Instead, she frowned and guarded against the brain-eating bug, which was dead but not dead. The mountain-like leaf, just now, was her strongest performance, but she did not expect that she still could not defeat a brain-eating bug that was on the verge of death. The gap between them was really shocking. Not only that, the most troublesome thing was that the brain-eating insect had completely turned into a loach at this moment. It quietly drilled into the thick mud, and even divine sense could not detect it. Silt could restrain the perception of divine sense to a great extent. Lin, he had already experienced this when he was on Sky State Island. Back then, he relied on this to avoid being locked on by Shishan Old Master's divine sense. Even if the two types of silt could not be compared, the effect was similar. Moreover, Duan Muyu's level of divine sense wasn't that strong. It was normal for him to not be able to find a brain-eating bug. If Lin, he was not so weak now, with his powerful divine sense, he might be able to lock on to the brain-eating insect. Unfortunately, this was a completely false proposition. He could only stabilize his essence soul by relying on the holy water pearl. Forcibly releasing his divine sense to search for the brain-eating insect was tantamount to self-harm or even courting death. Let's go. Lin sighed. At this time, the river was filling up bit by bit, and it was almost above his calves. The ominous feeling in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. His intuition told him that if he did not quickly return to the shore, he was afraid that something big would really happen. But Duan Muyu also knew that things were not good. Now, she did not know where the brain-eating insect was hiding, but one thing was certain. If she continued to collect the divine sense grass, the other party would definitely attack again. She had just used 2 falling leaves in the autumn and 1 mountain-like leaf in succession, which consumed a lot of her chi. She might not be able to withstand another attack. Withdrawing and retreating was the wisest thing to do. However, the divine sense grass was right in front of her. Giving it up would be a waste of God's gift, and it might become a lifelong regret. Where there's life, there's hope. This divine sense grass is growing here, and it won't run away. When I recover, I'll come back again. I just need to wait for one more day. Lin, he comforted her. These words were a bit self-deceiving. The divine sense grass did grow here, and of course it could not run away, but was the brain-eating insect not interested in it? Maybe after they left, it would directly swallow it in one bite? Okay, Duan Muyu finally defeated her impulse with reason. After making up her mind, she carried Lin on her back and retreated to the shore without hesitation. The two of them thought that the brain-eating worm would jump out to stop them, but there was no movement from the mud pile. They did not know if it had escaped or was still hiding in the mud and watching. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a figure on the distant shore quickly approached the two of them. After seeing the other party's appearance, Duan Muyu and Lin Yi's hearts thumped at the same time. The person who came was Shui Jianfeng. No one thought that they would actually meet this guy at this time and place. Oh, hey, the two of you got together so quickly. Aren't you afraid of offending public decency in broad daylight? The two of you are really open, really romantic. Shui Jianfeng looked at Lin Yi and Duan Muyu with a mocking look. You better watch your mouth. Duan Muyu suddenly glared. Although she was a tough woman, it did not mean that she did not value a woman's reputation. If she allowed Shui Jianfeng to talk nonsense, she and Lin Yi would not be able to clear their names, even if they jumped into the Yellow River. Chapter 5298. What do you know? Duan Muyu was completely furious. If it were not for the other party's gold core stage strength and the fact that she was carrying a weak Lin Yi on her back, she would have already slapped him. Okay, then I'll take it that I don't understand. But I really don't understand. Are you a tomboy, too hungry and thirsty? You actually squeezed the martial granduncle of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island into this state. Are you going to die of ejaculation? That's great. As the saying goes, dying under a peony flower is also romantic. Although you, a tomboy, are not a peony flower, you still have some beauty. It's a blessing to die on a woman's belly. I can't be envious. Shui Jianfeng made sarcastic remarks and scrupulously, completely forgetting that his life was just saved by Lin Yi a few days ago. His despicable nature was completely revealed. Duanmu was furious, but she was interrupted by Lin Yi. He glanced at Shui Jianfeng and said faintly, "What are you doing here?" Needless to say, of course, it's for the divine knowledge grass. Shui Jianfeng laughed loudly, his eyes staring straight at the divine knowledge grass that had been submerged by a little river not far away. "You know about the divine knowledge grass?" Duanmu was surprised. "Of course I know. Otherwise, why do you think I took the trouble to come here? If I can't find the divine knowledge grass, this once-in-a-lifetime ancient trial is just a fart," Shui Jianfeng said proudly. Although there were very few people in the small ancient world who knew about the divine knowledge grass, his father was after all the deputy sect leader of the Snowsword sect. He was also one of the big shots in the public, so it was not surprising that he knew some secrets. "So you have been hiding on the shore and watching since just now?" Lin Yi suddenly said in a deep voice. "Yes, all of you are so fierce. How would I dare to come up rashly?" Shui Jianfeng laughed. In fact, he did not know that Lin Yi and Duanmu were here at first, nor did he know that the two of them had found the spiritual consciousness grass. He was purely attracted by the brain-eating insect passing by in the sky. After that, he saw the confrontation between Lin Yi and the brain-eating insect from beginning to end and did not miss a single detail. To be honest, Shui Jianfeng was really shocked by the fierce strength of the two just now. He could not help but rejoice that he did not show himself rashly. Otherwise, even if he was an expert in the great perfection of the Gold Core realm, whether it was the brain-eating bug or the dragon Lin Yi, he would only be one-sidedly trampled. That would be terrible. Fortunately, he was wise enough to choose to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Moreover, God was also taking care of him in the dark. He actually created a result where both sides were defeated, allowing him to reap the benefits. Now, the brain-eating insect had been beaten half to death, and Lin Yi also looked like he was about to die. As for the remaining Duanmu, Shui Jianfeng did not put him in his eyes at all. He was an expert in the great perfection of the Gold Core realm. It was fine if he was afraid of a freak like Lin Yi, but could it be that he could not even deal with a trivial Duanmu? So, the spiritual consciousness grass is now in your pocket. Lin Yi's tone of the moment did not have the slightest emotion, and there was no hint of sadness or regret. It was completely an objective statement of fact. Duanmu was very unwilling, but what Lin Yi said was right. This time, Shui Jianfeng picked up a big bargain, and the spiritual consciousness grass would really be missed by him. At this point, he had no choice but to bow his head. "You let me win. You let me win." Shui Jianfeng cupped his hands insincerely. Seeing that the two of them were sensible enough not to stop him, he laughed proudly and walked towards the spiritual consciousness grass. With this thing, he could become the strongest Golden Core Realm Master. At that time, even existences like Lin Yi and the brain-eating insect could only tremble in fear under his feet. Just thinking about that scene was very beautiful. Unexpectedly, just as he leaned over to pick the spiritual consciousness grass, the brain-eating insect, which was no different from a loach, actually came out of the mud again, wrapped in the mud, menacingly. "Oh, is this guy the guardian spirit beast of the spiritual consciousness grass?" Shui Jianfeng could not help but feel a little surprised. Normally, a spirit beast that was injured to this extent would have already escaped without a trace. Even if it stayed, it would at most ambush strong crossbow archers like Lin Yi and Duanmu. He was a dignified Golden Core Realm Master. Where did it get such courage? Although he was surprised, Shui Jianfeng's reaction was not slow at all. From the beginning to the end, he did not take it lightly at all. He had already noticed the brain-eating insect's action the first time, and before the other party could hit him, he had already struck first. Sword falls ninth heaven. Puff! Blood splattered everywhere and the brain-eating insect, which was already a mess, was seriously injured again. With its super strong body, if it was at its peak, Swordfall's ninth heaven might not be able to break its defense. Unfortunately, at this moment, its degree of weakness was not much better than Lin Yi's. Immediately, half of its body was cut off by Shui Jianfeng, and it fell into the mud without any movement. Hee, it's so weak and it still dares to come out to die. A beast will always be a beast, brainless. Shui Jianfeng was very satisfied with his results. He turned his head and saw that Duanmu Yu was about to return to the shore with Lin Yi on his back. He suddenly felt a little regretful that no one appreciated such an awe-inspiring scene. Looking at the spiritual consciousness grass that was submerged in the water was already over his waist. If he did not pick it now, it would be troublesome. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly went up to cut it off from the root, and then picked up the spiritual consciousness grass. However, in the process of bending down to pick up the spiritual consciousness grass, his whole body was inevitably immersed in the water. This time it was not good. Shui Jianfeng's expression changed greatly, and with a strange cry, he rushed out of the water with all his strength. He did not hesitate to use traceless snow steps, desperately escaping to the shore. Traceless snow steps was not only a movement martial skill that doubled the speed, but it also had a miraculous effect on this kind of water surface. Every step was supported by ice and snow, so he would not sink into the water, and his speed was very fast. What's the situation? Duanmu Yu was shocked. Before she could react to what was going on, Shui Jianfeng, who was far behind her, and Lin Yi, had already rushed to the front. Run! Lin Yi hurriedly urged. At this time, the most shocking thing was not Shui Jianfeng's strange reaction, but the state of the entire spiritual consciousness river. For the past 2 days, the speed of the rising tide was similar to the speed of the ebbing tide, and there was nothing particularly abnormal. But now, the rising tide was like the yellow river bursting its banks, and it could not be stopped, forcibly rolling up a huge wave. Once they were swept up by the huge wave, the consequences would be unimaginable. The situation was critical, so Duanmu Yu immediately increased her speed to the limit. The monstrous wave was extremely fast, but fortunately, the two were not far from the shore. As long as they could escape to the shore in time, they should be able to escape this disaster. Chapter 53:37. You want me to prove it myself? Lin Yi smiled at the word. It sounded reasonable. If he couldn't prove his identity with solid evidence, then the other party would be right in front of him. It's totally unwarranted. Isn't the parallel art of green cloud evidence? Grandmaster, aren't the mental cultivation methods and martial arts skills you just gave them evidence? Those are the ironclad evidence. What's the point of flipping through a few old registers? Everyone knows that the disciple register and the sect records are incomplete. How can that be considered evidence? Xian Ijia said angrily. Killing the donkey after it's no use. Nothing is incomprehensible. Lin Yi's face was nonchalant. He'd expected this day to come, and he didn't feel any anger towards it. His mentality was basically the same as being bitten by an ant. If he was really unhappy, he'd just reach out and crush it to death. Why would he get angry over it? Of course, there was not such a big gap in strength. However, in terms of body level, people like Chen Dongsheng were really just an ant in his eyes. Grandmaster, he's not joking. He's coming with people soon. You'd better think of a way. Seeing Lin Yi's expression, Xian Ijia became anxious. I'll wait for him to come. I'm trapped here and can't get out. What's the point of thinking? Lin Yi was very optimistic. Xian Ijia was speechless. He felt that he had bet on the wrong person. Although the situation was indeed difficult to deal with, he should at least think of a way to deal with it. What's the point of throwing caution to the wind? Xian Ijia stamped his feet anxiously. However, Lin Yi was like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. Xian Ijia had no choice but to leave in a hurry. Calculating the time, Chen Dongsheng would be coming with people soon. If they saw him snitching on Lin Yi, the first one to die would not be Lin Yi, but Exionegia. Not long after, a group of people arrived at the back cliff in a grandiose manner. The person in the lead was naturally Chen Dongsheng. Behind him, in addition to a group of gold core stage elders, there was also a group of black-clothed disciples in special clothing. They were the experts of the law enforcement hall. Lin Yi, the investigation team has confirmed that you are not the Archean martial uncle of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. Tell me, what is your ulterior motive for sneaking into the Green Cloud sect of the North Island by pretending to be the martial uncle? Chen Dongsheng said aggressively. He couldn't help but look at Ling Shan and Ziyu a couple more times as he said that. He'd been waiting for this day for a long time. Hearing this, Linny looked at him calmly and said faintly, "Since you said it can't be told, then what else can I say? So, you admit that you pretended to be martial granduncle?" Chen Dongsheng sneered. "Haha, why would I admit it? Isn't this all up to you, Vice-Head Chun? You're the one who initiated the investigation, and the people involved are all your people. From start to finish, it's all up to you. So, as long as you're happy," Lin Yi said with a smile that wasn't a smile. Chen Dongsheng paused. Lin Yi's reaction was far beyond his expectations. Even Ling Shan and the others beside Lin, he didn't seem worried at all, just watching the show. Watching the show? Did these people think this was a joke? As a Jianghu scammer, it's rare to be able to stay calm after being exposed, even if it's just on the surface. Chen Dongsheng smiled confidently and didn't waste any more time. He ordered, "Enforcers, listen up. Take down this Jianghu scammer who pretends to be our martial granduncle. If he resists, kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, a group of law enforcers immediately surrounded Lin Yi's group. The Golden Core Stage elders who came with Chen Dongsheng also each guarded a position. Because of the one step to heaven matrix, they did not have to worry about Lin Yi escaping. However, in order to avoid unnecessary casualties, they would also join forces if necessary. A battle was about to break out. Exionegia, who was following behind, had his heart in his throat. There was nothing he could do in this situation. Not to mention helping Lin Yi, he didn't even dare to stand up and say a word. All he could do was to watch the scene unfold before his eyes. "Are you sure you want to arrest me?" Lin Yi didn't even look at the crowd. He just stared at Chen Dongsheng calmly. Of course. Chen Dongsheng looked at him as if he was looking at a dead man. This time, not only were the masters of the law enforcement hall here, but also more than half of the Gold Core masters were gathered. Unless Lin Yi was a nascent soul old monster, he wouldn't be able to survive. "Okay, then let's start cleaning up the sect." Lin Yi nodded. "Oh, so you accepted your fate?" Chen Dongsheng was a little surprised. He thought that Lin Yi would put up a last-ditch struggle, but he didn't expect him to accept his fate so easily. "Accept my fate?" Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. He said meaningfully, "It's not appropriate to use this word on me, because the person who needs to be cleaned up is not me." With that, an invisible giant hand suddenly appeared on top of Chen Dongsheng's head. Without giving him any chance to react, his whole spirit was instantly grabbed and then locked into the space of the jade pendant. The whole process took less than half a second. The crowd didn't even realize what happened. They saw Chen Dongsheng suddenly collapse to the ground, motionless, as if his soul had been taken away. Leader Chen. A few elders in the Gold Core stage who were close to him quickly surrounded him. However, no matter how they shouted, it was futile. Chen Dongsheng had lost his spirit, and his body had become a vegetable. This time, everyone was scared silly, including the elders in the Gold Core stage. All of them hurriedly stepped back. Each of them looked at Lin Yi in horror. They didn't know what method Lin Yi used just now, but one thing was certain. Chen Dongsheng's appearance was definitely the work of Lin Yi. Originally, in their minds, Lin Yi, the Grand Uncle Master, didn't have much weight. After all, on the surface, he was just a master in the great perfection of the Foundation establishment stage. Who would have thought that such a master in the great perfection of the Foundation establishment stage could actually easily defeat Chen Dongsheng? Although the strength of Chen Dongsheng, the deputy head, was far from outstanding, he was still a master in the middle stage of the gold elixir realm. Looking at the inner sect, there were only a handful of people who could really beat him. Apart from the Taishang elder Qinjiu, even the strongest master in the gold elixir realm, Hong Zijuan, head Hong, could not possibly defeat Qin Dongsheng so easily. Lin Yi's move simply subverted everyone's understanding. Does anyone else want to try? Lin Yi smiled and slowly glanced at the crowd. Everyone who was swept by him was desperately retreating, for fear that they would accidentally follow in Qin Dongsheng's footsteps. Although the two could not directly improve in a level in a short time, it could greatly improve his understanding of mental cultivation methods and martial arts skills. Had Lin could, E was highest, E had Cheng E. Sensing that there was movement outside, Chun Jiu did not raise his head. He frowned and said, I have said that you can handle the things below by yourself. You don't have to report everything to me. The crowd could not help but look at each other. They had actually broken the rules by coming up without highest elder's permission. It was just that the current situation was special, so they had to do so. At this time, after listening to Chun Jiu's words, they suddenly felt a little awkward. Were they leaving? Or not leaving? Just when everyone was hesitating, Chun Jiu finally realized something was wrong. A figure immediately flashed out of the house. The next moment, it appeared in front of Qin Dongsheng, whose life or death was unknown. After giving Qin Dongsheng a careful examination, Chun Jiu suddenly turned pale with fright. He was a dignified, nascent soul-stage old monster, but he could not see what happened to Qin Dongsheng. He could only vaguely sense that Qin Dongsheng seemed to have no primordial spirit. However, how could a good person not have a primordial spirit? What the hell is going on? Tell me word by word. Don't leave out a word. Chun Jiu's face was extremely ugly. He could guess that this must be the work of Lin Yi, but before this he had never thought that Lin Yi actually had such a means. After listening to the description of these gold core stage senior executives, Chun Jiu's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He said a lot of useless nonsense. These people didn't know what happened to Qin Dongsheng at all. Because it happened so suddenly, they couldn't even accurately perceive the appearance of the soul-hooking hand. There was only one sentence to sum it up. Qin Dongsheng was glanced at by Lin Yi, and then he lay down. A gold core stage expert was just glanced at by someone and became this half-dead state. You actually dare to say this kind of nonsense? If that Lin Yi is so terrible and so heaven-defying, will he be trapped by a mere one step to heaven array? Chun Jiu was infuriated. These people were trying to push the blame on Lin Yi, making him a god. What a bunch of trash. Supreme Elder, please calm down. The gold core stage senior executives quickly knelt down, one by one, as if they were walking on thin ice. Although he was angry, Chun Jiu did not lose his composure. Although the description of everyone was a mess, at least one thing could be summed up. The means used by Lin Yi had exceeded the understanding of these gold core stage masters. In other words, the other party was not simply a primordial spirit of the Foundation establishment great perfection. He had really underestimated him before. In the immemorial underworld, the concept of a clan was greater than that of a master and a disciple. This was different from the Heaven Stage Island, and it was similar to the concept of the secular world. Master, please calm down. Disciple sincerity towards you and Vicehead Chun can be seen by the heavens and earth. It's just that considering the big picture, you really can't do it yourself. That would only let Lin Yi succeed. Lu Pingon said quickly. Chun Jiu was silent for a moment, squinting at Lu Pingon. In order to show that he had no disloyalty, Lu Pingon could only bite the bullet and choose to look at him. Even if his back was sweating profusely, he did not dare to look away. Finally, Chun Jiu's gaze softened. Stand up and talk. Yes. Lu Pingon finally breathed a sigh of relief, and other high-level gold core cultivators who came up together also stood up. However, they were all glared at by Chunjio, who sent them away with a single word. Tell me what you think. Chunjio said lightly. In this disciple's opinion, once you show up in person, there will be no room for negotiation. If you and Lin Yi don't come to an agreement and fall out in front of each other, the first to suffer will be Deputy Head Chun. If you don't fall out with him in person, then the news will inevitably spread, making people think that you have personally confirmed his identity as the immemorial Uncle Master. At that time, if you want to reverse the case and deal with him, there will be no justification. Lu Pingon analyzed. But if I don't show up, isn't it Dongsheng who will suffer? Chen Jiu frowned. In any case, he must protect Chun Dongsheng. So, this disciple's opinion is that we can talk to him, but Master can't show up in person. We should send another person to talk to him, so that no matter what the result is, there is still room for advance and retreat. It is not too late to make a decision after testing the other party's attitude. Lu Pingon suggested. Shinjo pondered for a moment and finally decided. Well, then I will send you to talk to him and find a way to find out his bottom line. Remember, no matter what, you can't hurt Dongqing's life. Yes, Master. Lu Pingon was overjoyed. He was willing to take the risk to suggest this so that he could get this chance. No matter what the result was, as long as he performed well, he would be able to occupy a more important position in Chunjio's heart. If Chun Dongsheng really couldn't be saved in the end, then Lu Pingon's chance would come. Chunjio sighed softly as he watched Lu Pingon leave. He looked at the unconscious Chun Dongsheng on the ground. Too bad he's an outsider. They arrived at the sky-reaching cliff. Xi and Ijia had already been sent out by Lin Yi to gather people's support. There was only him, Ling Shan, and the others in the formation. Ziyu's eyes went wide when she saw Lu Pingon's figure. Linny bro, you really are a genius. What kind of divine foresight is this? As long as the Grand Elder isn't an idiot, he'll probably send someone to talk to me. The only difference is who. All right, you guys go back to practicing. Don't bother with this bullshit. Lin Yi waved them off with a smile. Disciple Lu Pingon greets Grand Elder. Lu Pingon bowed solemnly. Oh, so you guys admit that I'm the Grand Elder now? Lin Yi couldn't help but smile. You must be joking, Grand Elder. Whether or not your identity is real isn't confirmed yet. But from your disciple standpoint, as long as there's a 1 in 10,000 chance that you're real, I will treat you as the real Grand Elder. I won't dare disrespect you at all, Lu Pingon said. Haha, you sure know how to talk. Lin Yi sized him up. What business do you have with me? I'm here for Vice Head Chun, Lu Pingon said carefully. Chapter 5341. Yes, there's another point. Although Lin Yi doesn't want to talk to me directly, it doesn't mean that he has to force you to talk to him in person. After all, it's not only us who need leeway, it's the same for him. Lu Pingon analyzed. Then, Chunjio signaled him to continue. I think that Lin Yi must have a request, and he definitely wants to talk to us, but he doesn't want to talk to me like this. First, he thinks it's too passive, and second, he thinks it's too embarrassing. Maybe he's looking for a mouthpiece to talk to, Lu Pingon said. Who? Chunjio asked. Xi and Ijia. He was the only one who could talk to Lin Yi and win Lin Yi's trust among all the high-level gold core cultivators in Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Okay, then you go to him. Chunjio's eyes flashed with a hint of fierceness. After this incident, it was obvious that Xi and Ijia would be a dead man. When Lu Pingon came to him, Xi and Ijia was still trying to win over other high-level gold core cultivators. He knew that it was a critical period for him to win the hearts and minds of the people. One more supporter meant one more momentum and one more chance of winning. Xi and Ijia's blood turned cold when he saw Lu Pingon, Chunjio's direct disciple. His first thought was that the matter was exposed and Highest Elder was going to punish him. When he understood what Lu Pingan meant, he couldn't help but be stunned. Judging from Lu Pingan's words, Highest Elder was going to negotiate with Lin Yi on an equal footing, and Lu Pingan and himself were the representatives of the two parties. Xi and Ijia certainly didn't dare to agree to this kind of thing without permission. After understanding Lu Pingan's meaning, he quickly ran to Sky Cliff to ask Lin Yi. Since they want to talk, let's talk. We won't lose anything anyway, Lin Yi agreed casually. Then how do we talk? Xi and Ijia said weakly. Can't you wrangle? Lin Yi glanced at him. Wrangle? Xi and Ijia stared blankly and said, Grandmaster, we should have a goal in our negotiation. Is wrangling with each other our goal? That's right. Wrangling is our goal. He can talk however he wants. All you have to do is one thing. Don't object or agree. In short, it's wrangling. Once you've wrangled yourself until you faint, you'll have succeeded, Lin Yi said. Why? Xi and Ijia did not understand what Lin Yi meant at the moment. Since it was just wrangling for the sake of wrangling, what was the point? There are two reasons. First, it is Chun Dongsheng who is half dead, not our people, so they should be the ones who are anxious. We have no reason to be anxious at all. When it comes to negotiations, it has always been the one who is anxious who suffers. Just wait and see. After wrangling for a long time, they will definitely lose their cool. That will be our chance. Lin Yi advised. Yes. Xi and Ijia nodded and asked, what about the second one? The second is you, Lin Yi said, looking at him. Me? Xi and Ijia was puzzled. Let me ask you, have you had any success in winning people's hearts these days? Lin Yi asked. Very little. Xi and Ijia was embarrassed. It was not that he did not work hard, but his strength and status were too ordinary. Usually, no one paid attention to him among the Gold Core stage higher-ups. At this critical moment, he did not have much appeal at all. Even if they were dissatisfied with the Chun family's faction, they would only laugh and say that he was overestimating himself after listening to his suggestion. Very few of them took it seriously. It was actually better now. Due to the deterrence brought by Lin Yi's display of power, the other Gold Core stage higher-ups no longer looked down on Xi and Ijia like before. After all, in their eyes, even if Lin Yi was not comparable to the Highest Elder, a nascent soul stage old monster, he was definitely not someone that they, the Gold Core stage experts, could compete with. However, it was unrealistic to say that he could be easily won over. So, this negotiation is an opportunity to increase our influence, Lin Yi pointed out. Xi and Ijia finally understood when he heard this. He patted his head and said, I understand now. Granduncle, you mean that this negotiation should not only be delayed, but it should be delayed to the point that everyone knows about it. In this way, we can form a concept in the sect that you and the Highest Elder are equal in status. As your negotiation representative, I can also increase my status and influence. Yes, but there's another meaning. Everyone knows that the Green Cloud sect in the North Island is divided into the local faction and the Chun family faction. Now, the Highest Elder of both parties is the representative of the Chun family faction. So, who do you think is the representative of the local faction? Lin Yi said with a smile. Of course, it's you, Granduncle. Xi and Ijia's eyes lit up. The reason why he couldn't rope in the senior management and disciples of the Gold Core stage of other local factions was that they didn't believe that he could shoulder the burden of the local faction. Now, Lin Yi stood out and made a rallying call. Not only did he easily get rid of Chen Dongsheng, but he also forced the Highest Elder to sit down and negotiate patiently. This was something that even Hong Zijuan, the head of the sect, couldn't do. In this way, once the idea of being an equal was deeply rooted in people's hearts, it was impossible for Lin Yi not to be the leader of the local faction. Because all the senior management and disciples of the Gold Core stage of the local faction would gather spontaneously. Once the momentum was formed, it would be unstoppable. So, why did he go and wrangle with him? Lin Yi shrugged. Understood. Xi and Ijia immediately went with confidence. What happened next was just as Lin Yi expected. Although Xi and Ijia usually looked honest and sincere, his brain was actually very active. He was able to argue with Lu Pingon with great eloquence and was not at a disadvantage at all. Lu Pingon almost went crazy. He thought he could relax a little without facing Lin Yi directly, but he didn't expect such a guy to come. At first glance, he looked like an ordinary pot of warm water, but after a long time of contact, he knew that this guy could never be boiled. He was no less difficult to deal with than Lin Yi. In the end, there was only one word: there was no way out. But he couldn't turn against him openly. After all, in this negotiation alone, they were the passive and weak party. Moreover, it was not that the other party didn't cooperate. Instead, it should be said that they were very cooperative. They just kept talking and wasting time. The other party was determined to fight a protracted war. What could he do? If it weren't for Chun Dongsheng, Chun Jiu would have turned against him long ago. But now he could only grit his teeth and suppress his anger, instructing Lu Pingon to continue to grind with Exionijia. But as time went on, Lin Yi's image and status in the Green Cloud sect of the North Island really changed. Chapter 5342. Initially, Lin Yi, the primordial Grand Elder who popped out of nowhere, was just a topic of discussion at most. Now, he was the second most important person after Grand Elder Qinjiu. People's hearts were always so subtle. An outsider like Lin Yi, logically speaking, should not be associated with the local faction. But now, he was about to become the flag bearer of the local faction. How can anyone explain this? Of course, Exionijia could be said to have played a huge role in this process. Not only did he drag Lu Pingon back and forth, but he was also vigorously promoting Lin Yi's position and drawing the local faction's higher-ups and disciples to their side. Otherwise, these people might not have gathered so quickly. Someone had to add fuel to the fire from behind. On the other hand, Lin Yi did not care about the messy things happening in the outside world. Other than guiding Lingshan and the others in their training, the only thing he did every day was to train himself. He relied on the spirit grass root to enhance his primordial spirit and strengthen the soul-hooking hand. These two were his top priorities at the moment. On the other hand, Lung Lung, who had returned to the Snow Sword School, ran into trouble. Lung Lung was placed under house arrest. That's right. As one of the disciples with the most outstanding performance in the secular world and the primordial trials, Lung Lung was placed under house arrest on the second day she returned to the Snow Sword School. The reason was that she did not follow the sect's orders during the training period. According to the father and son, Xue Liping and Xue Jianfeng, they did everything possible to determine that Lung Lung's previous behavior was a betrayal of the sect. If that was the case, it would not be as simple as house arrest. She would be sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts in public. However, the higher-ups of the Elder Council, including the sect master Hong Qingyuan, were not idiots. They could see Lung Lung's huge potential even with their toes. They would not do something like destroying their own pillar of support. Of course, other than Lung Lung's huge potential, the other two people's efforts could not go unnoticed. One was her master, Su Xiaodong, and the other was Bing Wuqing. If one were to say that Su Xiaodong was the lowest-ranked elder candidate and had no right to speak, then Bing Wuqing, who had stood up alongside him, was someone that no one could ignore. After all, after going around the secular world and the primeval trials, this young elder candidate was now an expert with gold core perfection. In the entire Snow Sword School, other than the Great Elder, who was the only nascent soul old monster, the strongest was the golden core perfection. Before this, there was only one golden core perfection expert, and that was the sect leader, Hong Qingyuan. And now, the Snow Sword faction suddenly had two more golden core perfection experts. One was Bing Wuqing, the other was Xue Jianfeng, and the other was Lung Lung, who was at Foundation Establishment Perfection. When Hong Qingyuan and the rest saw these people for the first time, they really felt like they had been smashed by a pie. A mere training in the secular world had actually brought back a bunch of pillars. This was not just a blessing in disguise, but a raging fire that was about to burn them to ashes. However, for Hong Qingyuan and the other top executives who had the right to speak in the sect, The sudden emergence of two experts in the peak of the Goldcore realm was a real trouble. That was a very real problem. If a newcomer appeared, what would the old people do? The immemorial martial world had always been a very realistic world, where one's strength determined one's status. Those with golden core great perfection were already existences that stood above tens of thousands of people in the Snow Sword faction, so their status naturally could not be careless. Even if they could not directly make Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng the same rank as the sect leader, they should at least be above the others, right? Otherwise, it would not match their strength. However, even if Vice Sect Master Xue Liping agreed, would the other 5 elders, including Qi Qinxiu, agree? Speaking of which, Xue Liping had always been restless as the Vice Sect Master. It was only because he was at loggerheads with Great Elder Qi Qinxiu that Hong Qingyan, as the Sect Master, had been able to control the situation. Now that there was suddenly his son, Xue Jianfeng, who was above tens of thousands of people, joining hands, how could he control the situation? Fortunately, there was still Bing Wuqing. Hong Qingyuan was a little worried that Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng were on the same side. He did not expect them to fight as soon as they came back, and the cause was Lung Lung. Xue Jianfeng tried every possible way to kill Lung Lung, but Bing Wuqing, who had never had any relationship with Lung Lung, stood out for the first time. Her attitude was very tough, and anyone who dared to touch Lung Lung had to be prepared to face her wrath. Although it was strange, Hong Qingyuan and the others were obviously happy to see it happen. Not only could they protect Lung Lung, a seedling with great potential, but more importantly, they had an excellent candidate to keep Xue Jianfeng in check. In the past, there was Great Elder Qi Qinxiu to keep Vice Sect Master Xue Liping in check. Although there were 2 more Golden Core Perfection experts now, they also kept each other in check, making it convenient for Hong Qingyuan to continue controlling the situation. In contrast, when Xue Jianfeng heard Bing Wuqing's stance, he was stunned on the spot. During the primeval trials, Bing Wuqing had helped Lung Lung out of trouble, which had already puzzled him. Now, she had actually gone from bad to worse, and was willing to shed all pretense of cordiality for Lung Lung. This was completely beyond his expectations. This was almost equivalent to openly standing on Lin Yi's side. What the hell was Bing Wuqing up to? In the end, in the face of Bing Wuqing's unreasonable and tough stance, and in the face of Hong Qingyuan and Qi Qinxiu's cooperation, Xue Jianfeng and his father Xue Liping could only choose to give in. After a long time of wrangling, they finally came up with a result that was neither painful nor itchy: house arrest. This time, Lung Lung was prepared to go into closed-door training. After she had stabilized her realm, she would start preparing to break through to Golden Core. The so-called house arrest could be said to be neither painful nor itchy to her, and was basically equivalent to no punishment. After the meeting, Xue Jianfeng deliberately blocked Bing Wuqing's way. There was a problem that he had to clarify. "Get out of my way." Bing Wuqing walked away expressionlessly. "Wait." Xue Jianfeng forcibly blocked her way. After the other higher-ups of the sect had all left, he lowered his voice and said, "What the hell are you doing? Do I need to explain to you?" Bing Wuqing glanced at him. "Of course. Don't forget that we're on the same side. It's fine if you don't help me, but you've been shielding Lung Lung over and over again. Have you ever thought about the consequences of this?" Xue Jianfeng said angrily. "What consequences could there be?" Bing Wuqing looked indifferent. Xue Jianfeng was about to explode from anger. He said angrily, "Shielding Lung Lung is equivalent to shielding Lin Yi. You're betraying the core." "Oh, but why did I hear that the higher-ups told us not to provoke Lin Yi? In comparison, it's more appropriate to put the label of betrayal on you. At least I didn't do something as petty as trapping and killing Lin Yi, am I right?" Bing Wuqing retorted. Chapter 5344. Of course, we have to arrange a position that matches my golden core perfection strength. Sect leader Hong, what kind of position do you think we should arrange for me? Shui Jianfeng turned his head to look at Hong Qingyuan. All of a sudden, everyone's focus shifted to sect master Hong Qingyuan, who had been silent all this while. At this time, he was still habitually tapping his finger on the table. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said, "This is not a small problem. We need to discuss it properly." Everyone looked at each other speechlessly. He spoke as if he was serious, but it was the same as not saying anything. This couldn't be blamed on Hong Qingyuan. From his point of view, there was no other way. After all, no matter what, a new generation expert like Shui Jianfeng had to shoulder a heavy responsibility. If he couldn't make the best use of the golden core perfection experts that other sects yearn for, then it would be a dereliction of his duty as the sect leader. But out of consideration for controlling the overall situation, Hong Qingyuan couldn't possibly let Shui Jianfeng, this rising star, overtake the host. Otherwise, with Shui Jianfeng and his father Shui Liping's character, things would definitely get out of hand in the future, and that would be a huge problem. Sect leader Hong means that this is today's important topic? Qi Qianxiu and the others looked at each other. That's right. Everyone sit down first. There's no need to rush over the position. Let's all express our opinions and discuss it to a conclusion. I think there's no need to fight over it anymore. What does everyone think? Hong Qingyuan suggested. Okay. Qi Qianxiu didn't argue and led the elders to their seats. Then, who will speak first? Hong Qingyuan's eyes swept across the crowd. Only he, the sect leader, had the final say in this kind of matter. However, the more it was so, the more he couldn't reveal his opinion. Only by remaining calm and letting everyone express their opinions would he be able to grasp the most initiative. Qi Qianxiu and the others looked at each other and remained silent. Because they didn't inform each other beforehand, they didn't dare to speak before they understood the pros and cons. Then I'll say a few words first. Shui Liping smiled, then said, as the saying goes, don't avoid relatives. Although Feng is my son, he's already a golden core perfection expert. I think we should arrange a corresponding important position for him. Otherwise, if word gets out, it will be hard to convince the masses. We might even be laughed at by outsiders. That's not appropriate. Vice Sect Master Shui, why don't you clarify what kind of important position you think we should give him? Qi Qianxiu narrowed his eyes as he asked. As an expert second only to the Grand Elder, I feel that he should at least be the second in command. I didn't say that he would be the sect leader. After all, he's still young and inexperienced. He won't be able to control the overall situation for the time being, Shui Liping pointed out. These words caused Hong Qingyuan's eyelids to twitch. His expression remained unchanged, but he couldn't help but want to curse in his heart. If he can't control the situation now, does that mean he wants to control the situation in the future? It turned out that this pair of father and son didn't want to be the second in command at all, but were plotting for his position as the sect leader. When Qi Qianxiu and the others heard this, although they frowned, they were secretly laughing in their hearts. This pair of father and son were really too arrogant. Weren't they clearly pushing Hong Qingyuan to their side? Second position? Taking it literally, the position below the sect leader is naturally the vice sect leader. Does vice sect leader Shui intend to abdicate and give it to his son? The third elder grinned. Then I have no objections. Although there's no such thing as a son inheriting the father's position in our Snow Sword School, your family situation is special. With such a good son, I feel that it's barely feasible to have him replace you as the vice sect leader. The fifth elder expressed his opinion. Seconded. The fourth elder nodded. I agree as well. The second elder nodded as well. Since everyone has the same opinion, then I have no objections. Qi Qianxiu nodded as well. With the current situation, it was already unrealistic to not let Shui Jianfeng take the position. Since that was the case, he might as well let him replace his father Shui Liping. In any case, he was already used to fighting with a vice sect leader. It didn't matter, even if the father was replaced by the son. Haha, everyone seems to have misunderstood. As the vice sect leader, I've always been conscientious and conscientious. Even if I don't have any merits, I've still put in hard work. Besides, I've never said that I want to abdicate, right? Schwell Liping sneered. Also, let me add something. My father, as the vice sect leader, doesn't seem to be the number 2 figure. Grand Elder Chi, haven't you always boasted that you're superior to my father? From what you're saying, you're eyeing my Grand Elder position? Chi Chinchou couldn't help but laugh. Shui Jianfeng. Although you're young, you've still grown up in the sect. Don't you know how the Grand Elder position came about? It's not self-bestowed. The Grand Elder is the same as the sect leader. It's a public election by the Elders' Council. At the same time, it has to be personally acknowledged by the Grand Elder. Do you think you can become a Grand Elder just because you want to? The second Elder snorted disdainfully. That's right. Other than strength, the Grand Elder's most important is his contributions to the sect and his deep qualifications. Which of these two do you think you're qualified for? The other elders echoed.